Chapter 1322. So, as long as you enter my space, even if you have broken through to the 8th level, you may not be able to defeat me. What's more, you're just a rank 7 ability user who's trying to use drugs to strengthen yourself. Don't you think you're underestimating a rank 8 ability user? Lin Xiao said with a smile as he looked at Xia Longyan, who was still vomiting blood. Not to mention that she was not only a rank 8 metahuman, she was also a rank 8 zombie emperor. Xikongchen actually wanted to send a rank 7 metahuman to deal with her. So what if she used medicine to raise her strength to rank 8? Even if Xikongchen, a true level 8 ability user, were to fight her, he might not be able to defeat her, let alone kill her. Blurg. The energy of the drug was unable to successfully break through the energy core in her brain. Because of Lin Xiao's suppression, her energy was directly intercepted and blocked in the area of her heart, causing it to explode. So now Xia Longyan's heart was damaged. Not only her heart, but her heart, liver, and lungs were also shattered by the impact of the energy explosion. She kept vomiting blood and couldn't even speak. Xia Longyan's mind went blank. She never expected Lin Xiao to have such an ability. Furthermore, it was 2 or 3 times stronger than she had imagined. Not only were her internal organs severely injured, but the energy that was drawn out from her heart by the drug could not enter the energy core in her brain, so it could only run amok in her body. This energy was extremely powerful, causing her muscles, bones, meridians, and blood vessels to expand. Woo! Cough. Ah! After a few seconds, Xia Longyan began to hug her body and fell to the ground, rolling around with a painful expression. Her body also began to swell, and her body shape began to change. Like Popeye, his 2 arms became thicker and stronger, and his originally slender thighs also bulged with rock-like muscles. The clothes on her body were soon torn and hung on her body. Although it was still hanging on her body, it didn't cover her important parts. Seeing her like this, Lin Xiao's eyes twitched. Oh my god! This was a little painful to the eyes. After rolling twice on the ground, Xia Longyan crawled on the ground and propped himself up with his deformed limbs. If it wasn't for the fact that her face was still intact, one would probably think that she was a mutated beast. However, her face was also a little frightening. Her face was covered in blood and covered with veins. It was extremely hideous. Phew! Phew! She propped herself up on the ground and slowly arched her back to stand up. Hee. Even if I use medicine, I still become stronger. The method wasn't important, as long as I could become stronger. Since you say that you are the master of this space, then come. Xia Longyan grinned, revealing a mouthful of neat but bloody teeth. His smile was a little frightening as he stared at Lin Xiao. After saying that, she suddenly reached out her hand and waved at her waist bag that had fallen on the ground. The bag immediately flew into her hand. She grabbed the pouch and shook it hard. A bunch of small metal objects fell out of the pouch. After that, Xia Longyan's 5 fingers formed a claw and grabbed the small metal objects. These round and square objects immediately flew towards her palm. In an instant, she held them in her hands, but in the next second, she threw them at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao waved her hand, and a black flame was thrown out, rolling towards the small metal objects that flew over. She quickly disappeared from where she stood and disappeared without a trace. Puff, puff, puff. The small metal objects weren't blocked by Lin Xiao's flames. Instead, they directly passed through the black flames and pierced towards where Lin Xiao was originally standing. Come out! What are you hiding for? Weren't you very proud just now? Come out! Come out! After seeing Lin Xiao's figure disappear, Xia Longyan's face turned ferocious. Both of her eyes, the whites of her eyes were filled with blood red. Her body turned in a circle, and her eyes swept in all directions. She wanted to find Lin Xiao's figure, but she couldn't see anything. No, I don't want to see your unsightly appearance right now. Do you want me to give you a mirror? I think those underground mutated beasts outside are cuter than you. Lin Xiao's voice came from the void. Without waiting for Xia Longyan to speak, she continued. Moreover, I don't need to appear to deal with you. Aha! After hearing her words, Xia Longyan suddenly looked down at his own body, and his pair of red eyes immediately widened. She screamed and immediately shrunk her hands and legs to cover her chest and thighs. However, just as she was panicking, the black flame in front of her, that hadn't disappeared, suddenly expanded and attacked her. Xia Longyan was startled. Then, she frantically retreated while covering her chest and thighs. For a moment, she forgot to defend herself and only knew how to dodge. However, the speed at which she retreated was not as fast as the black fire pouncing on her. In the next second, she was surrounded by the black flames, and then her whole body was wrapped inside. Lin Xiao immediately appeared and stood on a tree to the side. She stretched out her hands and pressed against the black flame in the void. Aha! At this time, Xia Longyan's scream came from inside the ball of flame. Then she began to rush around with the ball of flame. Because of Lin Xiao's control, the black flame immediately adhered to her body. As for Xia Longyan, because Lin Xiao had used space restriction to suppress the energy in her heart, it caused her own energy to be blocked above her head. Therefore, she couldn't turn her body into metal. Therefore, Lin Xiao's flame devoured the energy in her body that was stimulated by the drug. At the same time, it also devoured her skin and flesh. The pain in her body was like her whole body was being burned. Xia Longyan couldn't help but scream. At this time, Lin Xiao suddenly flashed and flew toward Xia Longyan. She stretched out her hand and stabbed it into Xia Longyan's heart that was still writhing. She casually nailed her whole body to a tree trunk and stopped. Humph! Xia Longyan looked at Lin Xiao in front of her in a daze. Then, her eyes slowly moved from Lin Xiao's face to Lin Xiao's hand, which was the position of her chest. Seeing that her entire chest was pierced, she looked up at Lin Xiao with a blank expression. You. Lin Xiao coldly withdrew her hand, which was still holding a beating heart. In this space that was not very bright, blood could still be seen dripping from her hand. Although I said that I don't need to personally deal with you, your heart seems to be of some use to me. Lin Xiao glanced at the slowly weakening heart in her hand and glanced at Xia Longyan. At this time, Xia Longyan suddenly stared at Lin Xiao's hand. The sharp black nails on her fingers made her reveal a look of disbelief. Chapter 1323. Although her heart had been dug out, Xia Longyan was not dead yet. She saw the black nails on Lin Xiao's hand, and her eyes revealed a look of disbelief. Lin Xiao looked at her eyes and then at her own hand. She smiled knowingly and said, "Oh, you can see that? But that's good. This way you can die in peace." As she spoke, she allowed her eyes to quickly turn completely black. She raised her other hand and stretched out 2 fingers to form a sword. The nails on the 2 fingers also turned into sharp zombie claws, and then suddenly stabbed towards her forehead. PFTT-. Xia Longyan's entire brain was stunned by the fact that the woman in front of her was a zombie. So when Lin Xiao suddenly attacked, she did not react. When Lin Xiao's fingers pierced through her skull, and all the way into her forehead, she still maintained a shocked and confused expression. Hua, come here. Lin Xiao stirred the 2 fingers that had pierced into Xia Longyan's brain, and then turned his head to the side and shouted, "Come here, there's meat to eat." Oh, a tiger's roar sounded out, and a half-grown orange and black striped tiger ran out. Lin Xiao waved his hand and threw the fresh heart in his hand towards the tiger. "Here, this is your reward. This is a level 7 paranormal's heart that has been processed with energy. You can tell that it tastes good just by smelling it." The tiger nimbly jumped up and caught the heart that Lin Xiao had thrown over, and began to chew on it. At this time, Lin Xiao pulled out his fingers from Xia Longyan's skull, and 2 of his fingers were still holding a level 7 energy core. It's rare to see someone with a grade 7 spatial energy core. Just nice, I can give it to Wen. Lin Xiao looked at the shining energy core in his hand, and smiled with satisfaction. Thump! Xia Longyan's huge body fell to the ground, and because it had lost its source of energy, its body began to slowly shrink. Lin Xiao raised his hand, and hooked the black flames that were still floating in the air, and covered Xia Longyan's corpse. Just as Xia Longyan breathed his last, a siren suddenly sounded in the secret underground research institute, where his superior, Kong Chen, was located. Professor Bai, who was talking to Sikong Chun, suddenly stood up from his chair. His expression changed, and he quickly moved away from his desk. He turned around and rushed out of the office. Sikong-chun was stunned by his sudden action. He stood up with a puzzled expression and curiously followed him out. What's wrong? He turned a corner and saw another door next to Professor Bai's office open. When he walked in, he saw Professor Bai's tall figure standing straight inside. He raised his eyes and stared at an alarm on the wall. The sound of the siren came from there. And there were several data displays on the siren that were beating violently. Xiaoyun's vital signs have disappeared. Professor Bai murmured as he looked at the monitors with a blank face. What? What did you implant in her? What do you mean disappeared? Sikong-chun's expression also changed as he asked him in surprise. I implanted a sensor in her body that can detect her vital signs. As long as she doesn't leave this earth, even if she is on the other side of the earth, I can still see her vital data here. But now all her vital data has disappeared. This means that she is dead. Professor Bai looked at the data on the instruments in confusion, as they all jumped to zero. And the data lines were also flattened into a straight line. He understood in his heart that Xia Longyun must have met with a mishap. Although he had a bad premonition when he heard Sikong-chun say that she went into the underground space, he didn't expect it to happen so quickly. How could this be? Not to mention that she has the ability to teleport to escape. She also has the potion that you gave her to increase her strength. Even if she encountered any danger, she should have the energy to escape. How could this be? Sikong-chun's expression of surprise was a little unreasonable. He was clear about Xia Longyun's ability, 7th level dual abilities, assault attack type and teleportation. She was completely a powerhouse in the assassination unit. How could she die in less than 3 days? I told you there is danger everywhere down there. Even a level 8 ability user is in danger down there. So when you said that she went down, I was already mentally prepared for this. Professor Bai suddenly lowered his head and raised a hand to cover his forehead. His voice became hoarse. In his opinion, Xia Longyun must have died in the claws of the creatures in the underground space, or in some mutant plant trap. He didn't count Lin Xiao, whom Sikong-chun had sent down to deal with. Sikong-chun looked at Professor Bai and didn't say anything. At this time, even if he comforted him, it would be better to let him quietly accept the fact. He just didn't know if Xia Longyun killed the woman in the base before she died. Lin Xiao's black flames burned Xia Longyun's body clean. She turned her head to look at the little tiger that was already licking its mouth. Lin Xiao casually asked it, "Delicious, right?" Roar! The little tiger opened its mouth, revealing 2 sharp canine teeth as it roared at her. Lin Xiao put away the energy core, clapped her hands and said, "Okay, as long as it's delicious. Think of it as a small compensation for not being able to go out. Stay here obediently. When I go up, I can let you out to get some fresh air." After saying that, Lin Xiao flashed out of the space and saw that the other 4 were already surrounding her, waiting for her. "Okay, it's done here. Big Red, take us to find the fruit." Lin Xiao glanced at the non-humans and suddenly called out to the big red cat. However, the big red cat didn't understand her human language. Seeing that she was looking at it, it didn't know what she was saying. It swung its tail and called out to her, indicating that it didn't understand. So Lin Xiao had to use a zombie's roar to speak to it. As a result, when the big cat heard Lin Xiao call it Big Red, it showed a subtle expression. It stretched its neck and looked at Lin Xiao with its eyes shining. Its 2 ears stood up and the tip of its tail raised. Lin Xiao looked at it in surprise. "Huh? Is this a sign of happiness?" Woof! At this time, the second wolf suddenly barked. It was obvious that it was already impatient. It wanted to surf, it wanted to run, it wanted to squeak. Lin Xiao looked at it speechlessly, then continued to roar at Big Red. The big red cat raised its head high, turned around with its tail raised, pointed its butt at Lin Xiao, and flew in a direction. "Let's go!" Lin Xiao immediately waved her hand and chased after it with the other 3. She went to pick the fruit. Chapter 13:24. After following the big red cat for a few minutes, they quickly arrived at a place. The plant forest here suddenly became spacious and bright. It had an area of about 3 to 4 acres, and this spacious area was scattered with small black plants. There didn't seem to be a lot of them, and they grew very scattered. with one plant on the left and one on the right. These black plants that were less than a meter tall had red chrysanthemum-like leaves growing on them. Among these short plants, only a small portion of them had a round black fruit like the one that the big red cat had brought back earlier. There was only one fruit on each tree, and some of them weren't even black but gray. Some of the plants that did not bear fruit still had a small flower growing on them, and the bright light here came from these flowers. It was a bright yellow radiance, and it was very beautiful. But because there weren't many of them, they didn't illuminate a large area. But in this dimly lit underground space, it was very pleasing to the eye. The leaves were red, the flowers were yellow, and the fruits were gray and black. It seemed like they would only turn black when they were ripe. Lin Xiao looked around and found that the geographical location was a bit strange. Because this location was very far from the energy cyclones, but it looked like the cyclones above deliberately avoided this area. She squinted her eyes and sniffed with her nose. Indeed, the air here was cleaner and fresher than the other places she had just passed. These blooming flowers that emitted a bright yellow light also overflowed with a pleasant smell. Moreover, the energy of these unplucked fruits was even greater than the one she had seen earlier. It seemed that it was because the one that Dahe had eaten before had been picked off. This place is very beautiful. It's not bad to be able to see this kind of scenery underground. Lin Xiao looked at the scenery in front of her. Fortunately, her eyes recovered the ability to distinguish colors. Otherwise, with her zombie-like eyes, the scene in front of her wouldn't be so beautiful. Puff Puff Dash Big Red stopped at the edge of this area and squatted on a plant that was a few meters tall. It seemed like it didn't want to enter here. After all, it was an underground creature. The energy of this fruit was actually in conflict with its body's energy, so it didn't like the smell here at all. If it didn't know that this fruit was useful to Lin Xiao, it wouldn't have come here to pluck the fruit. One had to know that it had come and gone as quickly as it came. It didn't even stay for a second. Lin Xiao looked at it and suddenly understood this point. She also realized that this place gave her a very comfortable feeling. There was no danger, and there was no danger. This was like a forbidden area for underground creatures. Woof! Suddenly there was a dog's bark. Erwang didn't care how beautiful or quiet this place was. He saw that the flowers here could glow, and he thought it was very magical. Although it couldn't see the color of these lights, the smell of these flowers made it very excited, and it liked them very much. Thus, when Lin Xiao turned around, he saw that Erwang had already pounced onto a dwarf flower. He was sticking out his big butt and wagging his tail, using his nose to sniff the flower with all his might. Lin Xiao was speechless. He really didn't want to take another look at this stupid look. He turned his head to look at Big Black next to him, and found that Big Black was just quietly swimming in this area. However, it was very careful not to let its thick body crush the plants of these small flowers. Fortunately, the plants were quite scattered, so there was a place for it to crawl. When Lin Xiao saw these plants, he suddenly thought that these plants had the same effect as the fresh catnip that Lin Wenwen brought back. He just didn't know which one was better. Based on Yuan Tianqing's condition, using catnip here was obviously not very reliable, because these two types of energy would obviously attack each other. And the energy here was so strong that it was so thick that it gathered in a thick layer above. If humans took catnip and came to this place, they might be attacked by the energy from above. However, it was probably this kind of fruit that grew locally and was immune to the energy in the sky, producing a relatively mild energy. Compared with the behavior of Erwang and Dahe, the reaction of the mushroom spirit was the most direct. It directly stretched out its tentacles to pluck one from the left and one from the right, and then absorbed it. It ate it. Lin Xiao turned her head and saw that it kept plucking and sucking. In less than a second, the originally round and shiny black fruits immediately shriveled in its tentacles. She was speechless and shouted at it, "Big mushroom, don't eat them all. Leave some for me." Saying that, she immediately started plucking the fruits. Fortunately, she and the mushroom spirit picked the ripe black fruits, and didn't pick the gray fruits. Because in those gray fruits, they could clearly feel that there was very little energy in them. Wherever the mushroom spirit passed, it destroyed all the black fruits. Dahe immediately raised its head vigilantly, and then circled a small piece of black fruit trees with its body, encircling less than 10. Then it looked up at Lin Xiao, and the mushroom spirit's performance. Its meaning was very obvious. Seeing that Lin Xiao also started to pluck, the mushroom spirit's action immediately sped up. And this thing had several tentacles, while Lin Xiao only had 2. Lin Xiao was so angry that she pointed at it and scolded. "Stop it! If you fight with me again, I'll beat you to death later." The mushroom spirit was stunned by her scolding, but in the next second, it immediately threw Lin Xiao's threat out of the sky. As a result, the zombie and mushroom duo fought back and forth. In less than a minute, other than the dozen or so black fruits surrounded by the big black circle, the rest of the black fruits had already been harvested by Lin Xiao and the mushroom spirit. Dahe, who was watching Lin Xiao and the mushroom fight over the fruits with great interest, saw that the two suddenly ran to its side and stood still, staring at the 10 black fruits in its circle, and immediately became vigilant. It opened the 2 fake eyes on its neck and stared at them. "Don't touch me," Lin Xiao said. "You're not eating it now, just keep it. It will rot by itself anyway. You can either eat them now, or you can pluck them for me." The mushroom spirit quietly put itself and its tentacles into the snake's circle, but it was whipped out by Big Black with a flick of its tail. Big Black felt that these fruits would not have so much energy after being picked. It was reluctant to pick them. It wondered if it could move these plants into its master's space and plant them there. Thinking of this, Big Black suddenly used the tip of its tail to insert a circle around the root of a fruit plant, and then used the tip of its tail to pick up the plant that it had cut open, and handed it to Lin Xiao. Chapter 1325. Seeing that Dahe had dug out a black fruit tree and handed it to her, Lin Xiao immediately understood what it meant. Oh, should she plant this in the space? It was a good idea, but, seeing that the plant had withered before she could reach out to take it, Lin Xiao looked at Dahe with regret. In less than 3 seconds after Dahe dug out the plant and handed it to her, it had withered instantly. That was embarrassing. Dahe turned its head and looked at the black fruit on its tail that had withered to the size of a baby's fist. The 2 eyes on the snake's face blinked with a blank look. Lin Xiao reached out to take the withered plant on Dahe's tail and looked at it carefully. As she took it, all the soil under the roots of the small tree fell down. She turned her head to look at the other small trees on the ground, showing a thoughtful expression. Dahe blankly looked at the withered tree in her hand, and then looked at the other plants on the ground. Lin Xiao thought for a moment, then turned around and gently waved her fingers at another small tree a few times. Several claws made a puff-puff sound on the ground around the roots of the small tree, cutting out the plant again. She didn't immediately pick up the plant, but stood still and stared at it for a few seconds. Sure enough, even if she didn't pick up the plant that had been cut off from the ground here, after less than 3 seconds, the plant followed in the footsteps of the one that Dahe had just handed to Lin Xiao. It withered in an instant. It seems that they can't leave this land unless I also dig up this land and put it into the space. But that won't work. The soil still has this kind of energy, so it can't be put into the space. Although these plants don't contain this kind of energy, they also rely on the energy in the soil to grow. Lin Xiao looked at Dahe and helplessly explained while pointing at the land under his feet and the energy cyclone above. Dahe was very smart, although it didn't quite understand Lin Xiao's words. Seeing all the changes in front of it, it somewhat understood what Lin Xiao meant. So these plants couldn't survive if they left here, and it was the same in Lin Xiao's space. Therefore, he could only pick the fruits here and store them in the space. These were very special mutated plants. Dahe bent down its neck in low spirits and looked at the last few fruits hanging on the small tree that it had protected. Woof! Wang also came over and barked at Dahe, wagging his tail. She seemed to be comforting it. Lin Xiao tried to move a small tree into his space as fast as he could. He wanted to see if the tree's reaction was different from what he expected. As a result, as soon as the plant entered her space, she immediately felt a sense of rejection from her space. Although it didn't have much of an effect on it, it still couldn't stop its life force from flowing away. Therefore, this plant that Lin Xiao moved into the space at an extremely fast speed along with the soil, also withered within 3 seconds. Only the ripe fruit was left to retain its own energy. In fact, Lin Xiao had also discovered that the energy of the ripened fruits was different from the energy of the unripened fruits, and the energy of the plants. It seemed like it had changed during the process of maturing. Lin Xiao shook her head at Dahe. No, I can't put it in. Dahe looked at her, and then at the remaining fruits. Then, it suddenly turned its head, opened its mouth, and swallowed all the other fruits. Lin Xiao glanced at it, and saw that after swallowing the fruits, there was no longer any reluctance in its eyes. So she turned around, and waved her hand in the direction of Duan Wan and the others. Let's go. It's time to return to the team. In the depths of this space, about a dozen kilometers away, a behemoth suddenly raised its head. With a covetous look in its eyes, it turned its head in the direction of Lin Xiao and the others. At the same time, Lin Xiao and Big Red both stopped at the same time. Lin Xiao stopped on a huge vine, frowned and turned her head to look in that direction. Her intuition was very accurate, especially when it came to the sense of danger, that something was staring at her. It was a feeling of a sudden chill from her back to the back of her head. Woo woo! Big Red immediately showed a vigilant look. It bent its 6 limbs and showed all its claws. Its neck and head were lowered at the same time. It bared its teeth, and let out a low roar in that direction. Lin Xiao stood there without moving. She smacked her lips. TSK, has the second wave of trouble appeared so soon? Looks like it's not a strange plant this time. As she spoke, she suddenly hit her figure, and all her aura disappeared. Roar! Sure enough, the behemoth's aura immediately stopped for a moment. Then it began to scan left and right. Seeing that Lin Xiao suddenly disappeared, Dahe and the others all withdrew their auras. In fact, they were fine because their levels were low. The energy aura on their bodies would not spread very far, so they were not discovered. And even if they were discovered, they would not attract the attention of the other party. However, because the energy aura on Lin Xiao's body was strong enough, and Big Red's level 7 strength was a little weak. But it could be considered that they had met the hunting requirements of those things. Feeling this aura, Lin Xiao finally realized that Big Red and the others were really driven out. Because if she did not feel wrong, this aura was already at the peak of level 8 strength. This kind of existence was generally very fond of energy-type food. In other words, they liked to kill creatures of other levels, and they liked to target creatures of the same level as themselves. This was because the weaker ones did not have enough energy, and the stronger ones could not defeat them. Therefore, it was just right for those of the same level. The same level was also divided into 3 stages. The latter stage was the peak of the level, and was about to enter the next level. This kind of creature liked to hunt creatures that had just entered the same level. This kind of energy core was not only easy to obtain, but also just enough to meet their needs. Therefore, the energy aura of Lin Xiao, the level 8 zombie emperor, immediately attracted the covetous attention of the level 8 creature underground. However, this unknown creature did not expect Lin Xiao to have this kind of invisibility skill, so it quickly lost its target. Roar! However, this unknown creature did not give up just like that. After it looked around a few times and did not find Lin Xiao's energy aura, it immediately roared angrily and rushed in Lin Xiao's direction. Bang bang bang! A series of earthquake sounds began to come from afar. Chapter 1326. Hey, what's going on? What's that sound? What's wrong? Why does it feel like the ground is shaking? Something big has appeared. It wasn't just Duan Wan, Xie Longyan, and the groups of people that Lin Xiao had split up. All of them felt the violent aura and the shaking sound. Lin Xiao quickly appeared beside Duan Wan and the others with a few pets. She did not dare to show herself. She didn't dare to show herself, so she gave orders to Duan Wan and the others while she was invisible. Hide yourselves. Something has appeared. Try not to face it, and take a detour if you see it from afar. Lin Xiao made a rough estimate of the commotion coming from that thing. It was about 10 kilometers away. It was probably an underworld creature of the same level as De Zhuang, but much stronger. Lin Xiao felt that if she were to face it alone, she wouldn't be in danger. Her life wouldn't be in danger, but her subordinates and pets might not be so. Perhaps the creature would act up and treat them like snacks. That would be troublesome. They didn't see Lin Xiao, but they heard her voice. The others responded in unison. Yes. Even if Lin Xiao didn't say anything, they could vaguely feel the pressure of the threat from afar. Listen to my command and move forward. The movement is in the direction of 9 o'clock. Let's go. Lin Xiao continued to remain invisible as she gave the command to set off. Since the creature was charging in her direction, they had to avoid it and take a detour. The direction of 9 o'clock was actually the direction where Lin Xiao had gone to pick the fruit. That should be a place that the unknown creature wasn't willing to approach. As soon as she gave the order, the others immediately rushed in the direction she pointed out. Lin Xiao followed behind them silently. She paid attention to the movements nearby and the sound of the unknown creature in the distance. The shaking of the ground was getting stronger, and the shaking sound was getting louder and louder. Lin Xiao leaped and stepped on plants that weren't dangerous from time to time. She stared left and right. Her eyes had already turned pitch black, because as the unknown creature moved closer and closer to her, she clearly felt a sense of crisis slowly rising in her heart. Her sense of danger told her that she couldn't go head-on against the level 8 creature that was charging at her. This was an underground creature that was about to enter level 9. Its strength was definitely more unpredictable than De Zhuang's. Fortunately, this thing didn't know how to hide itself at all. It just charged over with such a strong aura. It didn't seem to have a very high IQ. Bang bang bang. Boom boom boom. A 10-meter-tall pitch-black furry beast was running with all 4 limbs. Its body was at least 30 meters long. Its body was huge and strong, and its 4 legs were also very thick. His body completely ignored the mutant plants along the way, directly knocking them over. Its head was ferocious. Although its body was covered in black fur, its head was hairless. There were scales on its head, and there were tentacles hanging down from its chin. Its mouth was wide open, revealing 2 rows of glistening teeth and a purplish-red tongue. The saliva in its mouth spilled out as it ran, splashing onto the plants it passed by. Hiss! Its saliva immediately pierced through the leaves of the plants and landed on the roots of the plants, slowly corroding them. The beast's eyes were not big, but its mouth was very big. It was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws as it charged forward, causing a lot of noise. It didn't even avoid the energy cyclones and directly crashed into them. The cyclones would immediately erupt with a large amount of energy when they were broken, but this didn't affect the big monster at all. However, its movements immediately frightened some of the weaker creatures within a radius of 20 to 30 kilometers, causing them to flee back to their nests. All of them huddled together and trembled in fear, hugging their heads and curling their tails. On the other hand, there were also a few other giant beasts that were a few dozen kilometers away that had their attention slightly drawn to them. They were very concerned about the movements of their old enemies. However, the other party didn't cause a commotion by charging into their territory, so they didn't pay much attention to it. At most, they were curiously sizing up the charging beast, not knowing what it was up to. Lin Xiao quickly led everyone away from the direction of the unknown creature's attack. Only when she felt that it wasn't moving in their direction did she let out a sigh of relief. Although she didn't know what it was, she knew that it wasn't easy to mess with it. Fortunately, she was already psychologically prepared for the danger underground, so she quickly calmed down. At this time, they had already passed by the black fruit field and continued to explore in another direction. Lin Xiao didn't think that this big monster would drive thousands of underground creatures out of this underground space. Moreover, she found the highest point to look around, and she couldn't see the end of this space. She didn't know how big it was, but it definitely couldn't be too small. What is that thing? After Lin Xiao ordered them to slow down, Duanwan asked in confusion. She knew that Lin Xiao could hear her, so Duanwan didn't deliberately speak in that direction. I don't know, but it's a species that's stronger than De Zhuang. I don't know if I have a chance of winning against it, but I can still protect myself. Lin Xiao's voice sounded. No way? You don't even have a chance of winning now? Duanwan looked around in surprise and said. You've also sensed its formation. It's not that easy to deal with. Moreover, they are immune to abilities. I'm afraid that I won't be able to cut its fur directly with my claws. Lin Xiao guessed. According to the similarities in the body structure of those underground creatures, this made her very speechless. Moreover, her black fire had to be thrown into these monsters' mouths or necks to be effective. If it was hit on their skin, it probably wouldn't have much effect. Maybe if Wuxia came down and used a few lightning bolts to blast them, it would be more interesting. After hearing this, Duanwan sighed and said, "That's true. Then we really can only avoid it. I hope we won't encounter the next one." After feeling that they were getting farther and farther away from the monster, Lin Xiao asked everyone to stop. She appeared, turned her head to look in the direction of the unknown creature's aura, and frowned slightly. They had just entered the edge of the underground world, and they already encountered a pinnacle level 8 creature. What would happen if they went further in? She leaped onto the top leaf of the tallest plant and looked around in all directions. She looked at the direction of the cave that she appeared in and looked back at the direction of the space. At a glance, there were still countless energy cyclones connecting the sky to the ground. Chapter 13:27. After entering the underground space, Lin Xiao began to observe. Until now, she still hadn't found out what made the underground creatures rush to the surface. Could it be that the food chain below was broken? Or was there something else that could threaten them? It was difficult to threaten the low-level creatures, but not the high-level creatures. Why was that? Lin Xiao looked left and right, and suddenly saw the big red cat sitting leisurely on the side. Her eyes suddenly flashed, and then she clapped her hands. Ah, that's right. Why didn't she ask this creature that was originally from the underground? Thinking of this, she turned around and jumped in front of the big red cat. She looked up at it. The big red cat saw that she suddenly ran in front of it and tilted its big head to look at her in confusion. It didn't know what she wanted to do. Lin Xiao waved at it. "Come, come, come." Then she remembered that the cat wouldn't listen to her, so she used a zombie's roar to ask it. "Roar. Come, big red. Tell me why you went up?" She pointed at the top of her head to let the cat understand what she meant. "Ow!" The big red cat looked at her, not understanding why she asked this question. Lin Xiao nodded. "Yes, roar. Yes, tell me. Why go up?" "Woo. Ow, ow." The big cat rolled its 2 big red eyes, and then looked down at Lin Xiao and called out. Lin Xiao looked confused. She didn't understand. "Ow?" Seeing that Lin Xiao didn't understand, the big red cat looked at her in confusion. "Yes, I can understand what you're saying, but you can't understand me." Lu Tianyi appeared out of nowhere and stood a few meters behind Lin Xiao, looking at her speechlessly. Duanwan also came over and nodded in agreement. "Different languages. Let's see how you understand it." Lin Xiao turned to look at them, and then turned to look at the big red cat. She was speechless. Seeing Lu Tianyi and Duanwan, the big red cat immediately stood up and stared at them, showing that it didn't like them. "Oh, this child doesn't like us." Lu Tianyi looked at the big cat's reaction playfully. Wu, seeing that he was staring at it, the big cat immediately clapped its paws and stared at him. All right, you two stop messing around." Lin Xiao waved his hand at the middle of the two's gazes to disperse their gazes. She then roared at the big red cat in the zombie language. "Roar! What are you talking about? I don't understand." Hearing her words, the big red cat also revealed a dumbfounded expression. "Huh, you can't even understand what I'm trying to say? How am I supposed to tell you?" This time, it was the big red cat and Xiaolin's turn to stare at each other for a few seconds. Suddenly, one of the big red cat's ears twitched, and its 2 big eyes turned, as if it had thought of something. It suddenly turned its head and looked around. Then it quickly ran to Dahe, grabbed its tail, and dragged it down from the tree. Dahe was startled by its sudden approach. It struggled for a while with a confused look, but was soon dragged away. After the big red cat dragged it down, it threw it on the ground, pressed it down, and patted the ground beside it. If the big cat hadn't given it the first black fruit, Dahe would definitely have opened its mouth to bite it. But seeing the big cat's actions, Dahe seemed to understand something. So it curled up into a big lump on the ground and put its chin on its body, not moving at all. Seeing Dahe quietly stay on the ground, the big red cat immediately turned around and suddenly flashed towards Wang. Before Wang could react, he also bit this fellow's tail and dragged it down. Woof 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 woof. Wang's tail was bitten by the big red cat, and it immediately turned its head and bared its teeth at it. What is it doing? Lu Tianyi squatted at the side, and the more he looked at the big red cat's actions, the more curious he became. Lin Xiao, Duan Wan, and the others were all observing the big cat's actions, and all of them had a thoughtful look on their faces. When the big red cat dragged Wang to Dahe's side, it directly used its paw to press it down on the ground. Facing an enemy that was twice its size and one level higher than it, no matter how much Wang struggled, of course, it was useless. Although it was still fiercely roaring at the big red cat, the result was that its head was pressed to the ground by the big red cat, with one paw to stop it from moving. However, Wang wasn't as smart as Dahe. It felt that if the big cat released its paw, it would immediately jump up, but in the next second, it was quickly pressed down again. So just like that, one didn't let it go, and the other wanted it to go, and it was tossed back and forth. Alright Erguzi, don't move. It wants you to stay there and don't move. At this time, Lin Xiao suddenly said to Wang. Woof. Wang heard what she said, and immediately barked at her discontentedly. But it didn't continue to compete with the big cat. Sensing that Erguzi didn't want to run anymore, the big red cat released it as expected. Then it turned its head to look at Big Mushroom. But it didn't look for Big Mushroom. Instead, it retreated a few meters in front of Dahe and Erguzi. Then it kicked its two front paws and suddenly stood upright, using its two hind legs to support it. Then it opened its mouth and showed its big white teeth in a very exaggerated manner. Suddenly, it bared its fangs and brandished its claws at Dahe and Erguzi. Roar, roar. Although its movements were very exaggerated, its voice was not loud. As it roared, it waved its four upper paws at the two opposite it. Then it put down its body and used its body to make a posture of attacking Dahe and Erguzi. Dahe and Erguzi looked at it with confusion, and they didn't understand what it was trying to express at all. However, Lin Xiao looked at the big red cat's movements, and a thoughtful expression appeared on her face as she held her chest and touched her chin. As soon as Duan Wan saw her expression, she knew that she must have thought of something. She asked her curiously, "Do you understand what it is performing?" Hearing Duan Wan's question, Lu Tianyi also turned his head curiously and stared at Lin Xiao, waiting for her answer. Lin Xiao saw that after the big red cat roared at Dahe and Erguzi for a while, the big red cat saw that Buttface and Dahe were still in a daze, so it immediately used its head to bump one of them and kicked them with its feet to make them retreat. I'm just guessing that this big cat seems to be demonstrating a very powerful monster. Is it driving them away? Or is it going crazy? Dahe and Erguzi's roles should be those creatures that are driven to the ground. Or is it an order? I don't know if it's right, let me ask it. Lin Xiao said as she jumped down and stood next to the big red cat. Chapter 1328. Lin Xiao waved at the big red cat and said, "Roar. Come on, I'll ask you a question, okay? If I'm right, you nod like this, nod. If I'm wrong, you shake your head like this. Okay." She nodded and shook her head as she spoke. The big red cat sat on the ground, curled its tail, and nodded its chin at her. Lin Xiao looked up at its chin. Well, this guy's sitting posture was also very high. She used a zombie's roar to ask it, "Were you ordered to go out?" The big red cat nodded. It was indeed ordered to go out. Lin Xiao asked again, "Was it a very powerful creature that ordered you?" The big red cat continued to nod. "How powerful? More powerful than the aura just now." Lin Xiao once again compared the unknown creature that made a lot of noise just now. At this moment, the big red cat's two ears immediately moved back and turned its head to look left and right. Its two big eyes looked around a few times before it lowered its head and nodded at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao could see that it was very afraid of that powerful existence. Even if it couldn't feel the creature's aura, it still had an instinctive fear. Moreover, it nodded. Did that mean that there was indeed a level 9 mutated creature ruling this underground world? Lu Tianyi, who was standing on the tree, said, "It seems that it is very afraid of the powerful creature. The creature's majesty makes it instinctively feel that as long as it is mentioned, it will be afraid." Since he became a zombie and lived in Lin Xiao's space, the creatures he dealt with the most were either zombies or mutant beasts. The little tiger, Dahe and Buttface, who would come out from time to make trouble, and even the mutant chickens, ducks, and geese in Lin Xiao's space, as well as the sheep and roe deer across the lake. After seeing so many of these mutant beasts, he could more or less understand the meaning of their reactions and actions. Duanwan turned her head and looked at him. "So afraid? It is already level 7, but even it is afraid. It seems that this level 9 creature should be the leader of this underground space? Only one ruler? A level 9 mutant beast, and one that survived in these underground places. Compared to Dong Xiaowei, the level 9 adept on the ground, wasn't Dong Xiaowei weaker than him?" However, just when Lin Xiao, Duanwan, and Lu Tianyi had similar thoughts, Big Red patted her paw again and shook its head. "What do you mean?" Seeing its reaction, Lin Xiao asked in confusion. "Roar!" "Awoo!" Big Red raised its 2 front paws and gestured randomly at her. Lin Xiao replied, "I don't understand what you're trying to do." Big Red paused and rolled his eyes at Lin Xiao in disdain. "Wow, did you see that? It will roll its eyes at you. This is looking down on your intelligence." Lu Tianyi noticed the big red cat rolling its eyes. He immediately looked at Big Red, as if he had discovered a new continent, then looked at Lin Xiao and exclaimed in surprise. Lin Xiao, whose intelligence was looked down upon, was speechless. Now that this brat's mood had recovered, why did he feel like he needed a beating? Duanwan glanced at Lu Tianyi before turning back to look at the big cat. He asked curiously, "Then what does it mean? Did the leader say something wrong?" But it nodded just now. "Doesn't that mean that the ruler here is stronger than the one just now? Why is it shaking its head now? Is it wrong? It should be true that it's very strong, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't have reacted so fearfully just now. I'm sure that it's afraid," Lu Tianyi said. Lin Xiao looked at the big red cat, and then at the others. She couldn't figure out what it meant by shaking its head. But forget it. Anyway, it meant that there was a very powerful being ruling here. Maybe there was more than one. After all, in every natural world, as long as there was a powerful being, other creatures would submit to it. This was a very normal rule. Thinking about a level 9 underground creature, she didn't know what it would be like. But she knew that she couldn't fight it head-on. But on second thought, why did that thing only send out some low-level creatures? Were they soldiers? Or did it want to catch up with the level 7 and 8 creatures? But why did it chase these creatures out? Was there a purpose? These questions immediately occupied Lin Xiao's mind. No matter what, she had to figure out the background of this powerful creature first. As long as she observed it slowly, maybe she could get some clues. Thinking of this, Lin Xiao immediately looked at Big Red and asked, "Do you know where its nest is?" When Big Red heard her asking about the nest of that terrifying creature, it jumped up leisurely and took 2 steps back. It looked at Lin Xiao with its ears pressed down, and its face was full of doubt, indicating that it didn't want to go there. "What's wrong? You don't want to go?" Lin Xiao looked at its reaction, and guess what it was thinking? Roar, roar. Big Red immediately nodded at her. Lin Xiao touched her chin awkwardly and thought for a while. She said to herself, "But if I don't observe it, I won't know its purpose. Do you know?" Saying this, she turned her head and looked at Big Red. She then asked it using the zombie language, "Why did it order you to go out?" This is a bit hard to understand. So why did it order you to go out?" Big Red stared at her for 3 seconds, then shook its head. Lin Xiao looked at it with a confused face. "What do you mean by shaking your head? Can you guess?" She turned her head to look at the others, and found that they were also looking at the 2 of them with a confused face. Lu Tianyi shrugged. "I guess it doesn't know what it was sent to do. That's what I think." Lin Xiao looked at him, then looked at Big Red, and asked it using the zombie language, "You don't know what it was ordered to do? It just wanted you to go out?" Haha. The big red cat nodded. indicating that Lu Tiany's guess was right. While Lin Xiao and the big red cat were having a hard time communicating, Yuan Tianxing, who was in her space, suddenly woke up. The purple color on his body had almost disappeared. Only the wound on his shoulder still had a trace of purple. Yuan Tianxing opened his eyes, but what he saw was an unfamiliar ceiling. He turned his head to look around, and found that the light outside the window wasn't very bright. It was the kind of sky that the sun had just set. He moved his body, and supported himself up with his arms. After looking around the room again, he looked down at his own body. The feeling of weakness in his body told him that he probably had to take a few steps out of bed to take a few breaths. The memory in his mind was a bit blurry, making him feel like he had a memory lapse. He propped up his upper body and sat on the bed with one hand behind him. He closed his eyes and thought about it carefully. Only then did he remember the last thing he remembered. Chapter 1329. Yuan Tianxing remembered that when he was investigating the situation in the underground gorilla's cave, he was swept away by the river in order to save someone. He could still clearly remember the feeling of being melted by the heat. He remembered that when he finally came out, he seemed to be a little unconscious. As for how he returned to the base, he had no memory of it. Then where is this place? After sitting up, Yuan Tianxing felt that his body was abnormal. It took him a lot of effort just to get up. After turning over and getting out of bed, he felt that his legs were weak when he stood up, but fortunately, he could still stand steadily. After standing for a while, he took a deep breath and walked toward the window. He held onto the windowsill and looked outside. He found that the scenery outside seemed very familiar. After checking left and right, he was sure that he was in Lin Xiao's space. The tranquil surface of the lake, with all kinds of agricultural crops planted by the lake, and the boundless grassland on the other side of the lake. There was also a white mist in the sky. There was a faint throbbing pain in his shoulder. Yuan Tianxing raised one hand to cover his shoulder. He let out a sigh of relief. It seemed that Lin Xiao brought him in, and probably gave him some kind of treatment. Otherwise, he wouldn't have woken up. He guessed. Yuan Tianxing turned his head and pulled his clothes to look at the wound on his shoulder. He slowly moved back to the bed and sat down. Not only was his body weak, but he also felt that his head was empty. He couldn't feel his energy at all. He didn't know what happened to his body, but from the situation he was feeling now, it was obviously a side effect. Fortunately, his life was saved, so Yuan Tianxing didn't feel uncomfortable. Instead, Li Hongsheng, Fang Datong, and the others who were thrown in by Lin Xiao felt Yuan Tianxing's breath. They all ran downstairs. Is Deputy Leader Yuan awake? Feng Mingyu raised her head and looked upstairs. Then she walked in as she spoke. He's awake, he's awake. I just saw him standing by the window. Fang Datong strode to the stairs and said with certainty. The others immediately squeezed into a group and ran up, quickly rushing to Yuan Tianxing's room door. Yuan Tianxing sat on the bed and rested for a while. Then he heard footsteps coming from outside the door, getting closer and closer. It seemed to be coming towards him. Before he could finish his thoughts, he saw the door open. Deputy Leader. A group of people immediately squeezed in and stared in Yuan Tianxing's direction. Hey, hello. Yuan Tianxing gently raised his hand to greet them and said weakly, good timing. Since you're here, tell me about the current situation. Did the leader treat my illness? When Leng Mingyu and the others came in, they saw that he was supporting himself with his hands on both sides of his body. He seemed to be struggling. She walked over and helped him lean against the headboard. Then, she placed a pillow behind his waist. Yuan Tianxing leaned into a comfortable position, looked at them, and asked, why are you all here with the leader? Shouldn't he be doing his own things in the base? Now, other than Li Zheng and Duan Wan, everyone else was gathered here. There must be something else going on. Yes, Deputy Leader, how do you feel now? Lin Yu and the others didn't immediately answer his question. Instead, they all asked him with concern. I'm fine. Just that my body doesn't feel too good. Everything else is fine. Answer my question first. Was my condition treated by the leader? Why are you all here? Yuan Tianxing looked at them and repeated his question. The others looked at each other. Feng Mingyu couldn't help but say to Yuan Tianxing, Yes, it was indeed the leader who treated you. But the most important medicine was brought back by Miss Wunwun. Without the medicine she brought back, even the leader wouldn't have been able to do anything. I heard that the leader could only help you suppress the condition in your body. He couldn't wake you up. I should say that the biggest credit belongs to Miss Wunwun. Deputy leader, you owe her a life. How do you want to repay her? Ling Yu came over and smiled at him. What? Wunwun is back. When did she come back? Do you know where she went? When Yuan Tianqing heard that Lin Wunwun was back, he immediately looked at them with a surprised expression. Then, he continued to ask curiously, what did she bring back? He didn't expect Lin Wunwun to come back while he was unconscious. He didn't expect to hear such good news as soon as he woke up. We're not sure what she brought back, but that's what we know. We only know that Miss Wunwun brought back an important plant. That's why your condition was greatly improved. You'll have to ask the leader about the specific situation. But the leader is busy now, Li Shenghong said to Yuan Tianqing. With their status, they didn't know much. With their current status, they could only receive superficial information. Their boss Li Zheng and Duan Wan probably knew about it. Is that so? Then I'll have to ask about it. But I didn't expect it to be Wunwun. Lin Yu is right. I do owe Wunwun a life. Yuan Tianqing knew that Lin Wunwun was the one who saved him. This meant that he owed the two sisters his life. However, he had owed Lin Xiao his life more than once or twice. He had long since repaid his debt. After all, he and Lin Xiao had been comrades for more than 10 years. In addition, they were low-level colleagues. Only Lin Wunwun had done this for the first time. We're very deep underground. It's at least 10,000 meters. We all followed the leader down here. And we also discovered a very large and mysterious underground space below. Because we're too weak, the leader threw us in so that we wouldn't be a burden. Lin Yu answered Yuan Tianqing's second question. Only then did Yuan Tianqing realize that all of them were only at level 3 or level 4. And their direct superiors, Li Zheng and Duan Wan, were not around. But the amount of information they gave him was a bit too much. Yuan Tianqing was stunned for a moment before he digested it. You said the leader brought you more than 10,000 meters underground? Who else besides you? Only our team and Captain Duan's team followed us. The rest are the people from the leader's secret army. Furthermore, apart from us, the rest of the people that the leader brought down this time are all level 5 or 6. Vice Commander Xie is also here. Lin Yu looked at the others. Seeing that they didn't say anything, he automatically answered. Chapter 1330. Xie Dong's official position was now the vice commander of the Universal Base's secret army. Of course, the vice commander was their leader. In fact, Xie Dong's current position was more or less the vice commander of the second base. Including Qiu Lili and Elmar, the Universal Base had a total of 5 vice commanders. However, in the eyes of the other bases, other than Lin Xiao, the leader, there were only 2 deputy leaders, Lin Feng and Yuan Tianqing. Seems like the underground space is very dangerous. Otherwise, the leader wouldn't have let all of you in. Yuan Tianqing thought about Lin Xiao's arrangement and could roughly guess the situation outside. No matter what, this might be the base camp of the underworld creatures. According to the strength of the creatures above, there might be even more powerful creatures guarding their lair in the underground space. At this time, Lung Mingyu poured him a glass of water and walked over to pass it to him. It is indeed not safe outside. The mutant plants here are much more aggressive than those on the surface. Furthermore, the air in this space is not suitable for human activities. The air here is filled with the energy that invades your body. There's a thick layer of it above the space. Yuan Tianqing took the water and nodded. At this time, outside the space, Lin Xiao and a bunch of zombies were looking at the big red cat gesturing. In the end, is it trying to say that it doesn't know why the boss is chasing them out? Everyone squatted on the tree and looked at the big red cat's gestures for a long time before coming to a conclusion. Lin Xiao looked at the big red cat and asked it in zombie language, "You don't know why it ordered you to go up, right?" The big red cat immediately sat down and nodded at her with its front paws. Lin Xiao looked at the others and lowered her head to reveal a pondering expression. It only ordered them to go out. but didn't tell them what to do after going up? Looking at what they're doing now, is it to let them move freely after going out? At this time her expression froze. She then said, "You guys stay outside." As she spoke, she flashed into the space and appeared in front of Yuan Tianqing's room. She knocked on the door and said to everyone inside, "Are you all here?" As soon as she spoke, the others immediately turned to look at her and subconsciously moved to the sides. Lin Xiao walked in and observed Yuan Tianqing's expression as he walked. He then narrowed his eyes to look at the condition of his body and said, "There's still some in your shoulder and chest. It's best not to move around." "Yes." Yuan Tianqing looked at her and nodded. He smiled at her and said, "I owe you again. How many times have I been saved by you?" Lin Xiao shrugged at him and tilted his head. "You're still talking about this? If you really want to calculate it, you probably won't be able to repay it even in 3 lifetimes, right? But this time, I'm not the only one who saved you. Wenwen also helped a lot." After saying that, she glanced at the others. Lin Yu and the others immediately understood and left the room. After Lin Yu closed the door, he murmured, "If you really want to say that I owe my life to the leader, I also have a share." That time he really thought he was done for, but in the end he came back to life. His sister, however, was missing. They still couldn't find her. She wasn't among the captives in Earth Dragon, and there was no news from Hidden Cloud City or Skyfire. They didn't know if she was still alive. Yuan Tianqing looked at Lin Xiao and asked her curiously, "Where did Wenwen go while she was gone? How could it be such a coincidence that she brought back a plant that's useful to me?" Lin Xiao pulled out a chair in his room and sat 1 meter away from his bed. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and leaned against the back of the chair. This isn't a matter of coincidence. Don't forget what Wenwen's second ability is. She has the ability to predict the future and knows it's useful to us. But if you ask me where she was while she was gone, you probably won't believe me. She inexplicably returned to 7 years ago. It was as if she had the ability to travel through time. Amazing, isn't it? What? Back to 7 years ago? Yuan Tianqing's expression was exactly as Lin Xiao had expected. His eyes widened slightly, revealing a look of confusion. Did he hear wrongly? Or was Lin Xiao wrong? But she'd emphasized the time travel aspect. She couldn't have been joking. But that was unscientific, wasn't it? Are you serious? Yuan Tianqing looked at her with a dumbfounded expression. Lin Xiao thought his expression was quite cute, even though he didn't look like a little fresh meat or a baby face. Yuan Tianqing was also the kind of man who liked to laugh and had a calm personality. His eyes were usually half closed, and it was rare for them to widen. Even when he was angry, they were sharp like 2 swords staring at you. Lin Xiao had known him for so long, and she'd rarely seen him so wide-eyed. She looked at him with an expression that said, "This isn't scientific. I don't believe it. I don't believe it." Suddenly he pointed to himself and said, "I'm telling the truth. Really?" Lin Xiao raised an eyebrow at him. Yuan Tianqing stared at her speechlessly. That's right. This guy had even died once. And he had even changed his body. He was a completely different person. Lin Xiao was amused by his expression. She put down her hands and crossed them in front of her chest. Everyone's reaction is the same, but I haven't seen you like this for a long time. Well, it was thanks to Wenwen's prediction ability that she brought back the herb to save you before the apocalypse. How are you going to thank her? It was the second time Yuan Tianqing was asked how he was going to thank Lin Wenwen. He looked at her helplessly. Can I exchange my life for hers? But what about what I owe you? Lin Xiao immediately raised her hand to stop him. Oh, I don't need you to pay me back. You can't pay me back anyway. Just take care of my Wenwen in the future. Of course I will. Yuan Tianqing glanced at her with dissatisfaction. Was he that kind of heartless person? Of course he'd return the favor he owed her. But Lin Xiao's words made him sound like an ungrateful person. After the outbreak of the apocalypse, he followed Lin Xiao not only because he liked her in his heart. It was also because Lin Xiao had disobeyed military orders and saved his life when he was on a mission before the apocalypse. And because of that, he gradually fell in love with her. But he loved her, but she only treated him as a comrade and a friend. She didn't have any other feelings for him. Chapter 1331. Lin Xiao looked at him helplessly. Okay, this man couldn't understand what she was trying to say? Or was he pretending not to understand? She clearly said that she would take care of him. And it wasn't an ordinary take care. But no matter how much she wanted to push her Wenwen into his arms, she couldn't force it. But if the two of them let nature take its course, when would she be able to get her brother-in-law? According to her Lin Wenwen's character, Lin Xiao didn't know how long it would take for them to get to the main topic. By the way, what's the situation outside? Is it okay for you to come in? At this time, Yuan Tianqing immediately asked her about the situation outside. Lin Xiao nodded and said, yes, it's safe outside for now. But we can't estimate the size of this underground space, and the entire space is covered with a thick layer of fog formed by energy. Because of the existence of this energy, the plants here are very aggressive. Their levels aren't high, but they are more dangerous than the same level mutated plants on the surface. Speaking up to this point, she paused, touched her chin and continued. But now we know why those underground creatures suddenly emerged from the surface. They were chased out by an underground mutated creature that was no lower than level 9. But these creatures that were chased out didn't have any purpose. We just don't know why this unknown level 9 underground creature chased them all out. Since we entered this underground space, although there are many dangerous auras in this space, the quantity is a lot more scattered. Since entering this space, she had scanned the surrounding 15 kilometers for any unusual auras that could make her feel. She realized that with her perception ability, she couldn't feel anything. Only when the level 8 underground creature that caused a huge commotion appeared, did she feel many auras in this space. Although they were very strong, she had a vague premonition that she couldn't provoke them, and they were very scattered. In general, it was a lot more spacious, but there were also dangers everywhere. You guys encountered each other? Yuan Tianqing guessed something from her expression and looked at her. Lin Xiao nodded and said, yes, we encountered a mutated plant at the beginning, but it was scared away by Big Red. However, they were scared away by Big Red. They also saw a mutated tree that the Chinese encountered. Its attacks were also very demonic. I also took the opportunity to teach them a lesson. Yuan Tianqing's eyes flickered. The Chinese are here too. Lin Xiao said, this time, we're not the only ones going into the underground space. We've joined forces with the other bases to send people down. The people sent by Sikong Chun wanted to do something to me, so I took care of them. Not only did Sikong Chun send people to deal with us, he also sent a group of people outside our base to cause trouble, but they were also cleaned up by Lily and the others. I think he'll be preparing to take action against our base and Sea City base. Yuan Tianqing showed a thoughtful expression and asked her doubtfully, can Leader Wu handle him? Lin Xiao glanced at him. Do you doubt his ability? Yuan Tianqing leaned against the headboard and shrugged. Well, it's not that I'm suspicious. After all, Sea City's research, technology, and weapons were inferior to Wuxia's. I'm just worried that if Wuxia goes all out, Haiqing's overall strength will definitely be weaker. Although Leader Wu is here, it's inevitable that there will be times when he can't handle it. If Wuxia used some powerful weapons or long-range missiles, it would be difficult for Wu Qingyue to take over Haiqing's large area. Lin Xiao said to him, don't worry, Sikong Chun won't make such a big move at this time. He always liked to play dirty tricks. Moreover, before I came down this time, we got rid of a group of his hidden subordinates. Sikong Chun was about to die from anger. I still remembered that when he came down a few days ago, his face was as black as the bottom of a pot. Based on his personality, he won't give up on continuing to investigate our base. This time, he will probably increase his strength and continue to go to our base to meet with resistance. Yuan Tianqing snorted coldly. He really doesn't want to give up. Lin Xiao stood up at this time. Okay, since you're awake, you still need to rest more. But you still need to rest more. You should be able to feel your own body's condition. Yuan Tianqing nodded at her, then suddenly looked at her and said, thank you. Lin Xiao sighed at him. You're welcome. If something happens to you, it will be very troublesome for me. You have to stay alive to help me deal with the affairs of the entire base. After saying that, she smiled and spread her hands. Yuan Tianqing said helplessly, Looks like I have to work like a horse for you for the rest of my life. What else? But it's fine if you don't want to work, as long as you can find me someone who can take over your position. Lin Xiao joked with him. After saying that, she flashed and disappeared. After leaving the space, Lin Xiao saw that everyone else was quietly staying where they were. Now that they had figured out why the underground creatures had come out of the ground, it seemed that it was impossible to summon them back. However, it seemed like it was impossible to summon the underworld creatures back. Think about it. How could a level 9 underworld creature be willing to follow the human's instructions and summon back the low-level creatures that were sent out? The level 9 creature would probably give you a claw first. It seemed that if it didn't work, they could only find the holes in the tunnels, pour a large amount of catnip, and blow up the holes. However, this method wasn't safe, because the underworld creatures could create a new tunnel. Therefore, this could only hold out for a while, not for too long. The most effective way was to first figure out why the level 9 underground creature wanted to drive a large number of underground creatures out of the ground. Only by knowing their intentions would they be able to effectively resist their army. So the problem now was how to trick the big red cat in front of them, to bring them to the level 9 creature's territory. Seeing Lin Xiao's gaze on it, it immediately pricked up its ears. Lin Xiao looked at it, and then at the others. She asked them, "How do you think we can make this guy willingly bring us to the level 9 creature's territory?" The underground space was too big, and she couldn't blindly lead everyone to look for it. However, she had only asked this fellow once, and it had already shown its instinctive fear. If she wanted it to bring them there, she had to get it to overcome its fear first. The others looked at each other. They shook their heads and said, "How would we know? We're not familiar with it." Chapter 1332. The group of people looked at each other, then looked at Big Red at the same time. When Big Red saw that they were all staring at it, it immediately became vigilant. It widened its red eyes and looked at them cautiously. Lin Xiao continued to use the zombie language to test it. "How about you take us to that place?" "Kiki, which place?" Big Red looked at her blankly and tilted its head. Lin Xiao said, "It's the place that ordered you to go. You don't have to take us to a very close place, as long as it's nearby." She should be able to sense its existence when she was nearby. If she still couldn't sense it, then she had a way to lure it out. But the premise was that she had to go to that place. Based on the aura that she felt now, this was definitely not the activity range of the level 9 unknown creature. This was because there were quite a few level 8 creatures here. Moreover, these level 8 creatures each occupied an area, and each had their own territory. So to find the territory of this level 9 underground creature, they definitely had to pass through the territory of these level 8 underground creatures. But she needed Big Red to lead the way. Otherwise, she was afraid that she would go in the wrong direction blindly. Woo-woo! Big Red lowered its body and retreated a little, but its pair of big eyes that looked at Lin Xiao showed a hesitant expression. "Or you can point me in a direction. You don't have to lead us there." Lin Xiao thought for a while and said to it. In the eyes of others, the zombies could understand Lin Xiao's zombie language. At least they could guess the meaning of the conversation between the two of them. But in the eyes of Duan Wan and Li Zheng, they were at a loss. They had no idea what the zombies and humans were talking about, because in their eyes, the situation was that Lin Xiao and the big red cat were roaring at each other. "What is she saying?" Duan Wan couldn't help but ask out of curiosity. "Well, she said that if it doesn't take us to the level 9, it can take us somewhere nearby. If it doesn't want to, then it can at least point us in a direction, so that we don't have to search blindly like this." Lu Tianyi stood beside her and answered after hearing her question. Duan Wan nodded. "Yes, that works too. Although I don't expect this big cat to draw us a map, it should be able to point us in a direction." "Awoo!" Hearing Lin Xiao's request to take a step back, Big Cat stood back up. He shook his beard at Lin Xiao, opened his mouth and called out to her twice. Lin Xiao looked at it for 2 seconds and said, "What do you want to say?" De Hong was also stunned. Only then did she realize that Lin Xiao understood her words. Then he let out a heavy sigh, sat down, and lifted a claw to scratch the ground in front of him. I feel like our leader is being despised by it again, right? Duanwan didn't know whether to laugh or cry when she saw this scene. Obviously, Lu Tianyi nodded affirmatively. At this moment Big Red stood up again, turned around and swung its tail. Then, it looked back at Lin Xiao, raised its front paw, and waved at Lin Xiao. He then leaped up and landed on the vine of a mutated plant. Follow it. Lin Xiao immediately swept a glance to the left and shouted coldly. Then, he quickly followed behind the big red cat and continued to move forward. The group of zombies immediately followed, shuttling through the strange underground plants. With Big Red leading the way, Lin Xiao and the others encountered a lot less unexpected situations. Moreover, they easily avoided the dangerous areas and ventured deeper into the underground world. As they followed Big Red, Lin Xiao and the others found that the space was getting more and more spacious. Moreover, the poisonous superpowers above them were much denser than when they first came in. Even the cyclones that were connected to the top and bottom like tornadoes were getting thicker. After running for a long distance, the big red cat suddenly stopped. It stood on the branch of a leafless plant, its ears perked up, and its tail wagging as it looked left and right. Its 6 feet stomped on the ground, unwilling to leave. Lin Xiao asked, "What's wrong?" Giggle giggle, the big red cat turned around and meowed at her strangely. It then sat on the branch and refused to move. Lin Xiao looked at it and thought for a while, then asked, "Are we almost there?" According to the distance she had just calculated, the distance that Big Red had brought them was less than 100 kilometers. Were they already there? Big Red shook its head at her, then raised a paw and pointed in front. Lin Xiao followed the direction of its claws and looked ahead. The rising and falling underground plants continued to move forward. She squinted her eyes and looked around. Apart from the purplish-red energy, she didn't see anything strange. Then he sniffed with his nose and smelled a fishy smell. Is there a water source in front? Did you stop because there's water there and you can't get close? After Lin Xiao smelled the water vapor, he glanced at the big red cat and muttered to himself. Duanwan, Li Zheng, and the others landed not far behind her. After hearing her words, Lu Tianyi nodded. Yes, I did feel the aura of water energy, about a kilometer away. Is it afraid of water? Lin Xiao turned her head to look at Lu Tianyi, then looked back at Big Red. She suddenly shook her head. No, it shouldn't be afraid of water. Maybe there is something in the water. Can you feel the hidden energy under the water? She asked Lu Tianyi the last question. Lu Tianyi shook his head. It's a bit far, I can't feel it. If we can go to the water, then I can feel it. He was a water elemental, so his perception of water was several times stronger than others. He could also know what was under the water. Of course, the premise was that he could touch water. Lin Xiao frowned and thought of the big river from before. Maybe it's the same as the big river we encountered before. Or maybe there is other energy in the water. No matter what, we have to go and take a look. Looking at Big Red, since it brought us here, it means we can only go in this direction. We might have to cross the river. Then she looked at Big Red and asked it in zombie language. How far are we from where we are going? The big red cat raised a paw and tapped a few times with its nail. Haha. Lin Xiao still didn't understand what it meant, so she pointed forward and said, Then we have to keep going. Aren't you going? Big Red shook its head and wagged its tail. Then it raised its paw and pointed at Lin Xiao. Then in front of them, it pointed back and forth a few times before stopping. Lin Xiao finally understood what it meant. Oh, you mean you don't want to go and just let us go? Then we can find the place if we keep going, right? Sure enough, Big Red nodded its big round head at her. Chapter 1333. Seeing that Big Red actually nodded, Lin Xiao could only say to it, Okay, since you don't want to go, then we'll go first. Lin Xiao turned around and waved to the others, then flashed and flew forward. After Lin Xiao and the others disappeared in front of them, the big red cat sat on the bare top of the tree. Its huge body formed a big red lump on the tree. Lin Xiao led the others forward for less than a kilometer, and sure enough, they saw a dark river. The river was as black as ink, and the surface of the river was as calm as a black belt in front of them. The two sides of the river were dozens of meters wide, and if they wanted to cross it, they could only fly or swim. However, Lin Xiao felt that this dark river didn't reflect any light, so it shouldn't be simple. She stretched out her hand behind her and said to the others, "Don't get close." At the same time, she squinted her eyes to observe the river. When she squinted her eyes, she saw that the entire river had changed color. The originally black river had turned into a dark purple energy color, and the entire river was dark purple, purple to the point that it was black. Lin Xiao raised her head, and the energy in the river was thicker than the ones floating above her head. Therefore, this water couldn't be touched. Needless to say, humans Yuan Tianxing would be the first to suffer. On the zombie side, Lin Xiao also felt that the energy in the water made her feel a sense of danger. Because the energy in the water was too thick, even if it was an immortal zombie, touching a drop would cause its energy and flesh to corrode. Lin Xiao opened her eyes and looked at the river with a calm face, and ordered the others behind her. "This water can't be touched. You guys move back a bit." Lu Tianyi originally wanted to touch the water in the river, but after coming here, his zombie instinct sensed the danger in the river. Since they couldn't touch the water, they could only fly over. Lin Xiao could fly, but she had to first put the others into the space. But the big red cat also could fly, but it didn't want to go near the river. Why was it? Or was it afraid of the energy in the river? That wasn't possible. It also had this kind of energy in its body, so the energy in the river shouldn't be able to hurt it. Then why? "Come here. Get ready to enter my space, and wait for me to cross the river before you come out." Lin Xiao waved at the zombies and asked them to line up in front of him. Everyone immediately flashed in front of her and lined up in 2 rows. Lin Xiao threw out 2 long hemp ropes and gave one to each team. When everyone caught the ropes at the same time, they pulled hard. He brought them into the space and threw them in front of the small building. "Stay where you are and wait for orders." Lin Xiao only said one sentence before leaving in a flash. In the middle building next to the one they were in, Yuan Tianxing was sitting on a chair by the window and looking out. Suddenly hearing Lin Xiao's voice, he stood up and stretched his head to look outside. After Lin Xiao disappeared, he saw the 2 rows of zombies standing still, as well as Duan Wan and Li Zheng. "What's going on? Why did I throw all of you in here?" After resting, Yuan Tianxing's aura was much stronger than when he had just woken up. At least he still had the strength to speak, so he looked down at the team members from the window and asked. Everyone turned their heads at the same time, and didn't show any surprised expressions when they saw him. This was because Lin Xiao had already told them about Yuan Tianxing waking up. "There's a river that we can't cross. Leader needs to cross it alone." Li Zheng, who was standing closest to Yuan Tianxing, answered his question. Yuan Tianxing smiled and said, "Thanks to Leader's space, this mission has saved us a lot of trouble. Only our base has this benefit, other bases don't have it." Li Zheng also showed a funny expression. At this time, after Lin Xiao came out of the space, she stood a few meters away from the riverbank. She didn't rush to fly over the river, but squinted her eyes and began to observe the movement of the energy in the river. She always felt that there was something else in this river full of poisonous superpower. However, Lin Xiao stood on the riverbank and quietly observed for nearly 3 minutes, but she didn't see anything else in the river, nor did she find anything abnormal. After confirming that there was really nothing wrong, she jumped up and waved her hand to release a black fog under her feet to lift her up. When she rose to a height of 20 to 30 meters, she flew toward the river. As she stared at the situation in the river below, she suddenly felt a pressure pressing down on her head. When she moved to the top of the river, Lin Xiao looked up and saw that the thick fog thousands of meters above her head had a dense number of whirlpools. The moment she raised her head, these whirlpools suddenly fell from the sky. Tornado-like cyclones suddenly descended onto the surface of the river, instantly stirring up the originally calm river into turbulent waves. Hua la la. The tranquility of the water was immediately broken, and because these whirlpools immediately drilled into the river, Lin Xiao dodged in time to avoid the whirlpool closest to her, so she wasn't hit. But now, she was trapped in these countless whirlpools. Each whirlpool was only a few meters away, and because of the high-speed rotation, the surrounding aura had a strong suction force. It seemed that they wanted to suck Lin Xiao into these whirlpools. If she was sucked in, then she would be swept into the river. Although the situation was a bit dangerous, Lin Xiao now understood why the big red cat was unwilling to come close. If it was one or two whirlpools, it might not care. But with so many in front of it, it would be very troublesome to avoid them all. More importantly, the big cat probably didn't want to be swept into the water. While thinking about the reason why the big red cat was unwilling to come close, she used her hands to stabilize the black fog under her feet. Because if she relaxed even a little, she might be sucked into the whirlpools. But the power of the black fog was much weaker than the suction force of the energy whirlpools. She waved her hand, and a flame integrated into the black fog under her feet. She turned into a black flame and floated in the air. Poisonous energy tornadoes were coming down from the sky in all directions. If she wanted to go over, she could only pass through the gaps of these whirlpools. But the idea was simple, but it wasn't so easy to do it. In this way, Lin Xiao had to control the stability of her ability, while also contending against the suction force of these whirlpools. At the same time, she had to control her ability to move through the gaps. If she made a mistake, she would lose the balance of the suction force and be sucked into the whirlpools. Chapter 1334. While Lin Xiao was carefully exploring the underground space, the base on the surface had completely taken in the group of people brought by Dong Xinxin and his sister. In the past few days, all the necessary procedures had been completed. The original corpse hunting group established by Dong Xinxin and the others was called the March Corpse Hunting Group. People who didn't know what the two words March meant. Only Dong Xinxin and the others knew that March was actually only 3 months. 3 months after she was reborn. At the beginning, Dong Lijia wanted to call it New Life, while Luo Yuanjuan's name was a bit silly. He wanted to call it Resurrection. Deng Chenfei's name was more down to earth, and was called the Mysterious Corpse Hunting Group, because this was the evaluation given by others, low-key mysterious. Not only was he powerful, but he could also predict danger. Later on, Dong Xinxin bought it, and named it March. Now the March Corpse Hunting Group was very famous in Sea City. Basically, everyone living in Sea City had heard of the existence of the March Corpse Hunting Group. But not many people had seen them, because they were mysterious and low-key. As for the other corpse hunting group, that came with Dong Xinxin, and the others, Dong Xinxin, and the others were not familiar with them. After all, they only knew the leaders and managers. Dong Xinxin and the others also told Lin Feng that they couldn't guarantee that among the more than 10,000 people they brought, there wouldn't be people who would fish in troubled waters. After all, there were a lot of people, and they wouldn't check their details and recent movements one by one. Lin Feng expressed his understanding and didn't say anything about it. It was just that his trust in those people was still very low, and he still had basic vigilance. This time, for the mission of escorting supplies to Sea City, do the people from base number 2 need to enter Sea City together? Chen Yuding took the list of supplies to be sent to Sea City and asked Lin Feng this question. Because the medicine that Leng Xiantong and Shui Mingjun had made was very effective. At least the detectors in Sea City didn't have any reaction to the zombies who had taken the medicine, so they could completely act as normal soldiers and escort the supplies into Sea City. Who was in charge of the delivery this time? Lin Feng was looking at the information of the new residents who had just joined the base. When he saw Chen Yuding come in, he looked up at him and pointed to his chair. This time, it's the second base's 1st Regiment's Jing Yan and Yin Xiao who are in charge together. Our representative here is Du Yuanxing. Chen Yuding sat down and replied, because they were escorting important rations and fresh food, they had to increase their security. In order to be absolutely safe, they needed at least 1 or 2 rank 1 beast kings and a platoon of zombies to secretly escort them. Lin Feng thought about it and said, if Jing Yan and Yin Xiao want to go in, they can. But the other soldiers don't need to go in. This is because the zombie legion below level 5 still has the characteristics of zombies on their faces and hands. It was too risky to go in. Even if the equipment couldn't detect anything, the soldiers of Sea City might be able to see something with their naked eyes. As for Jing Yin and Yin Xiao, other than the whites of their eyes that had not recovered, they were basically no different from humans. As long as one was wearing sunglasses or contact lenses, the chances of being discovered were very small, almost negligible. Just the two of them? That's good. It's time to let them enter Sea City to take a look. Chen Yuding nodded, then looked at the stack of documents on the table and asked curiously, "There are so many people coming in this time. Will there really be no problems?" Lin Feng flipped through the documents and said, "There will definitely be problems, so we still have a lot of preventive work to do. We have to take precautions in advance so that we can deal with it in time." Lin Feng had already deployed a large number of city guards in the first base to keep an eye on every corner of the base. It was just that the number of city guards in the first base was too small, not enough at all. Although they were recruiting, because there were so many people now, the people were also mixed. So for the sake of the base's safety, the recruitment requirements were raised a lot, but there were still very few people who met the requirements. Also, they had to test these people's loyalty and character. At the very least, those who had been in the base for more than 3 months would not be able to apply to join the city guards. 3 months was just to meet the requirements. Whether they could be approved or not would have to wait for another 3 months. These 3 months would be spent on vetting. If there were no problems, once the vetting period was up, he would be directly appointed as a city guard soldier in the base. Especially now that they were in a dangerous situation with Wuxia, they could not let their guard down at all. Thinking of this problem, Chen Yuding also sighed. The main thing is that there are still too few survivors in our base, and the army is not enough. Now there are more people, but we can't recruit a large number of people at once. Should we specially recruit the people from the March Corps hunters into the army? As he said this, he suddenly had a flash of inspiration, and his eyes lit up as he looked at Lin Feng. Hearing this, Lin Feng stopped what he was doing and raised his head to look at him. Specially recruit, but there are indeed many people in the March Corps hunters. If we can persuade them to join the army, it would not be bad. As he said this, Lin Feng revealed a pondering expression. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that it could be carried out. Although Chen Yuding did not know why the March Corps hunters would suddenly be brought back to the base by Lin Wenwen, Lin Feng himself knew the reason. Just the leaders of this corpse hunter group were willing to wait for Lin Wenwen for 7 years, not to mention what kind of thoughts they had. Let's not talk about what kind of thoughts they had, but on the bright side, the character and principles of this group were good. At least, even Chen Yuding had stayed in Haicheng for so long, and he had not heard any bad rumors about this group. This showed that their style of doing things was relatively righteous. Even Wu Chengyue wanted to recruit them into the Haicheng army, which meant that the strength of this group was not weak. If they are really willing to join our army, maybe they will make Wu Chengyue very angry. Lin Feng suddenly thought of Wu Chengyue's reaction, and he did not know if there would be a crack in that guy's smile. Chen Yuding smiled and said, "What else can he say? With our leader here, we'll just send him off with a sentence of death. But what are the conditions for special recruitment? Have you thought of it? Just a guarantor. If they can get the recommendation of the first and second batch of survivors in our base, or the recommendation of the leaders of their group, they can meet the conditions to join our base's army. I still need to find the Dong siblings to discuss this matter," Lin Feng said after thinking about it. If they wanted to recruit them, but the other party was not willing, then it would be awkward. At that time, they might even send him a cold song. Chapter 1335. Chen Yuding looked at him in surprise. Those people in charge? You really trust them? Let's not talk about Dong Xinxin, who was small, but had an extraordinary position. Lin Feng shouldn't know the other 3 people well. Lin Feng nodded and said, "If it's them who recommend it, of course I'll agree. For the sake of Wenwen, I believe they won't recommend bad people to us." Chen Yuding saw that he was so sure and couldn't help but ask him, "What did Miss Wenwen do to them? Or did she say something?" Lin Feng only glanced at him with a smile and said, Maybe Wenwen helped them during a very important period. The two talked for a while, and Chen Yuding quickly left the office to deal with other things. Lin Feng took out a pen and paper to write down Chen Yuding's idea. After he finished dealing with the things here, he would immediately start to deal with this matter. However, Chen Yuding didn't leave for long, and hurriedly ran back. Seeing Chen Yuding come back in less than half an hour, Lin Feng looked at him with some doubt. What's wrong? And it's still about the matter of escorting the supplies. I also just got the news. This time we have to change the person in charge. Chen Yuding also slightly frowned and walked in. Lin Feng asked him, You mean Du Yuanqing needs to be replaced? Why? Chen Yuding said. His ability suddenly exploded just now. He's probably about to advance. I heard him say yesterday that he might be about to break through soon. I didn't think he would suddenly come today. I thought he was talking about within the next 10 days to half a month. Lin Feng's eyes stared blankly, then he revealed a slightly happy expression. Oh, that guy is finally about to advance? So it's like this, then there's no other way, we should indeed change people. How is his current situation? Have you sent him to Lin Hao? Chen Yuding nodded. And I've already sent him. The situation doesn't seem to be abnormal, but with Lin Hao there shouldn't be any big problems. Now we just want to discuss who to replace. Although there were a lot of level 5 and level 6 zombies in the base, there were very few humans. Li Zheng, Duan Wan, and Long Qingying followed Lin Xiao out, leaving Du Yuanqing, Lin Hao, Lin Wenwen, Cheng Wangxue, Little A, and a few others in the base. Little A, also known as Qian Xiaoai, was Lin Feng's intelligence team leader, so he was not by his side now. Lin Hao was from the medical center, so it was impossible for him to go on such a mission, so there were only 2 women left. Lin Wenwen had just returned, and she wasn't a combat type. Hence, the only candidate left was Lin Feng's own wife. Cheng Wangxue was in the physical department, and her own strength was not weak. If she hadn't followed him, she would have had a daughter. She wouldn't just stay in the base to deal with the base's internal affairs. Little A isn't here, so it's impossible for Lin Hao to go. Wang Shui, on the other hand, was very suitable. She had a physical ability, but Lin Feng quickly filtered through a circle of people in his mind. These were the only people he absolutely trusted. The other level 5 ability users had just entered the base, such as Qin Yu, Mo Chichi, and the others. They were not qualified to take on this kind of confidential mission related to resources. But what? Chen Yuding asked in confusion when he saw his hesitant expression. Wang Shui can't go out in the near future, so she can't take on this mission. Lin Feng thought about it and explained with some difficulty. This was because he had heard Lin Wenwen say before that he had to focus on his wife and child during this period of time. So at this time, although he felt that Cheng Wangxue was very suitable for this mission, he suddenly remembered Lin Wenwen's words. He felt that if Cheng Wangxue went this time, she would be in danger, so he subconsciously said this. If it wasn't for Lin Wenwen's reminder, Lin Feng might have directly let Cheng Wangxue carry out this mission. But now, on one side was his wife, and on the other side was the base's secret. He couldn't relax on either side, especially since he already knew that something bad would happen to his wife in the near future. Seeing Lin Feng's conflicted expression, Chen Yuding glanced at him and lowered his head to think. After thinking about it, he made a decision. Why don't you let me go? Anyway, I'll be back in 2 days. I'll have to trouble you to take care of the small matters in the base for the next 2 days. If it really couldn't be done, then he would go. He had a 6th level ability. He was definitely qualified in terms of strength. It was just that his own position had a lot of things to do. Although it was divided between Lin Feng and Yuan Tianqing, now that Yuan Tianqing wasn't here, he had to take over a lot of things. When Lin Feng heard this, he was stunned for a moment. Then, a thoughtful expression appeared on his face, and he nodded. You can go. Then I'll work a little harder and work overtime. Seeing that Lin Feng agreed, Chen Yuding immediately made a decision. Okay, then I'll ask Jinjin to bring you the documents that need to be dealt with in the next 2 days. She can also help. If you need her to do anything, you can ask her to do it. Because Shen Yuzhen's level was low, Lin Xiao kept her in the base. When she had nothing to do, she often ran over to help Chen Yuding deal with some small matters. In the afternoon, Chen Yuding escorted the supplies out of the base and set off for Haicheng. At this time, in the Wuxia base, Wei Haichao happened to play a hidden trump card in Haicheng. In a remote house in the outer district of Haicheng base, two men were secretly meeting here. One of the men exclaimed in surprise, "What? You want me to sneak into that team, and then sneak into the base? That's impossible. It's too difficult." "Why not? It depends on your strength. As long as you're willing to do it, there will always be a way to do it. You can find a chance to sneak under their car, or hide in the recycled equipment. You can even pretend to be one of them. Let's see if you have the guts." The other man said calmly, "Pretend to be one of them? You want me to go straight to my death? Do you think I'm blind?" The man who spoke first snorted coldly. The other man shrugged and said indifferently, "I'm just giving an example. You figure out how to do it yourself. I believe you can do it. Think about it. If this mission succeeds, you can directly get an official position in Wuxia. How great is that? You won't have to follow those zombie hunting groups all day in Haicheng to kill zombies." Chapter 1336. Two men were secretly plotting to sneak into Universal Base to escort the supplies. One of them expressed that it would be difficult to succeed on his own. "However, I definitely won't succeed if I go alone. Although Universal Base isn't large, they will definitely increase their security for such a secret escort mission. If there's no sudden chaos, I don't think I'll be able to sneak in even if I follow them all the way to Universal Base. Furthermore, if I fail this time, it will be even more difficult for you to send people in next time." The first man voiced out his judgment. If he was discovered, then the other side would definitely be more vigilant the next time, and his chances would be even lower. Therefore, he had to either have an absolute guarantee of success, or not make a move at all. Furthermore, since the various bases had obtained potions that could defend against zombies, they were rarely attacked by zombies. The mutant plants along the way from Haicheng to Universal Base had also been cleared. Therefore, it would be impossible for the team to encounter any sudden incidents, unless it was man-made. Furthermore, according to the information I've gathered in Haicheng is also very concerned about the supplies that Universal Base is sending over. After all, it's all fresh food, and the value of it is very high." The man added. The other man felt that what he said made sense, and thought about it silently. After a while he said, "However, after they've finished sending the supplies, their vigilance should be lower. How about this? I'll bring some people to pretend to be bandits to intercept them, and you can find a chance to sneak in. That should be fine, right?" In other words, they would bring people to rob the other side's team, and divert the other side's attention to the bandits. At this time, he could definitely find a chance to sneak in, and even if he couldn't find a chance, he could create one himself. The first man nodded. "And, if you're willing to bring people to help, then my chances of success will definitely increase." The second man said, "We can't wait any longer. Our leader has been preparing to deal with Haicheng. However, in order to prevent any accidents from happening, we need to quickly get to the bottom of this Universal Base. We can't let them become a chance for Haicheng to rise again." The first man was somewhat puzzled. Since we're not afraid of such a big base like Haicheng, why worry about this small base? Even if they have some ability, it shouldn't be enough to let Haicheng rise again, right? In his eyes, Universal Base was a small base with less than 10,000 people. Wuxia, on the other hand, had more than 1 million survivors, and the army alone had hundreds of thousands of people. Among all the bases in the country, only Haicheng had the strength to contend with Wuxia. Why would he be afraid that this tiny base with less than 10,000 people would be able to do anything? Therefore, when he saw that Wuxia seemed to attach great importance to this mini base, he was a little puzzled. Even with absolute strength, he still thought of ways to investigate the situation of this base. Wasn't he making a mountain out of a molehill? Although I think so too, you can't underestimate this base. If you're too careless, you'll suffer. Another man looked at him with some disdain. If it wasn't for the fact that Sikong Chun had sent people to that small base several times, and were completely annihilated, Sikongchen wouldn't have paid so much attention to this place. After all, what kind of power was the person they sent not long ago? Under normal circumstances, hundreds of level 5 and level 6 paranormals, coupled with the weapons they carried, could completely destroy this base. In the end, they were still cleaned up by the enemy without leaving any clues. If Sikongchen didn't pay attention to this small base under such abnormal circumstances, then he wouldn't have the ability to be the leader of Wuxia. Otherwise, he wouldn't have sent the undercover agents from Haicheng. In any case, don't worry about anything else, just follow my orders, he said to the person after thinking for a while. I understand. The other person nodded in agreement. That night, Chen Yuding brought 200 armed soldiers and transported a few tons of fresh fruits and vegetables towards Haicheng. Apart from him and the 200 human soldiers, there was also Jing Yan and Yin Xiao, each leading an elite zombie squad to escort them. Really? Is this thing really useful? Yin Xiao looked at the medicine distributed to her left and right with some suspicion. After all, if they drank this medicine and sneaked into Haicheng, what would they do if they were discovered by the virus detectors? This was their base's secret. If it were to spread in Haicheng, then it would be disastrous. Jing Yan said very calmly, "Don't worry. The people who are contacting us are all special forces in Haicheng. Even if they find out, Xiao Yunlong won't let them spread it. And we are going through a side door. There won't be any idle people waiting there. More importantly, Lung Xiantong has done enough experiments on this medicine. If he says there's no problem, then there shouldn't be a problem." They were using his own wife as an experiment. What problem could there be? Yen Xiao sighed. She was still a little nervous. I hope there really won't be any problem. The two of them were also mixed in with Chen Yuding's escort team. But their soldiers were hidden in the dark and followed the team. In order to keep the mission hidden, Haicheng would almost always set off to Haicheng at night. And by the time they reached Haicheng, it was already 2 or 3 in the morning. At the same time, for the sake of concealment, Haicheng opened up small doors for them to pass through. Therefore, it was very difficult to obtain this kind of information if they didn't deliberately inquire from various sources. In the middle of the night, Haicheng's team smoothly arrived at the side door of Haicheng as usual. The soldiers of Haicheng were already waiting outside the side door. And this time it was not Xiao Yunlong's deputy Huang Ming who came to contact them, but Xiao Liqing. After hearing the sound of the car, Xiao Liqing waved to his subordinates, and the soldiers opened the door. However, Haicheng's car did not drive directly in, but stopped at the door. Huh? Why is it your turn? Chen Yuding was slightly surprised when he saw that it was Xiao Liqing. Well, it's fine if they changed people here. But why did Haicheng also change people? Xiao Liqing stood next to their car and watched Chen Yuding stretch his head out of the window and look at him curiously. He said, Huang Ming suddenly began to advance his ability today, so it's my turn. Chen Yuding's expression was stunned after hearing this, and he looked at him silently for 3 seconds before saying, Did the two of them make an appointment? Advancing on the same day as a team? Xiao Liqing. Cough, it's a coincidence. Chapter 1337. Huang Ming and Du Yuanqing were originally 5th rank ice elemental. Now, both of them had entered a state of advancement at the same time. It was just unknown who would succeed first. But it looks like our old Du will succeed first. Chen Yuding got out of the car and waved to the driver. He told them to drive the car through the detection tunnel first. Then, the two of them stood to the side and watched the car slowly drive in while chatting quietly. Xiao Liqing heard his words and subconsciously asked, Why? Because we have the medicine. Chen Yuding smiled at him and said, Oh, that's right. I almost forgot that your leader seems to have this kind of medicine. He used it on Xiao Lingling before. Xiao Liqing remembered this point. When Xiao Lingling's ability was awakened, the energy went berserk. It was their leader who helped solve this problem. Come, there's something I need your help to verify. At this moment, Chen Yuding suddenly reached out and grabbed Xiao Liqing by the neck. He brought him to a side where there were fewer people and said, In a moment, I'll let 2 special girls pass through this detector. If anything happens, I'll have to trouble you to cover for them. What special girls? Xiao Liqing looked at him in confusion. Suddenly, he thought of something and immediately asked. Wait a minute, could it be someone from your second base? Chen Yuding nodded at him. Xiao Liqing looked at him in confusion. Why? If it was someone from your second base, it would definitely sound. Wasn't it obvious that they would be detected? No matter how much they recovered on the outside, the flesh and blood in their bodies had already deteriorated. It was equivalent to having a virus all over their bodies. Not to mention how loud the detector would go. It would probably go off before he even stepped into it. Chen Yuding looked around and saw that no one else was paying attention to their conversation. Only then did he open his mouth and say, according to the situation we prepared earlier, it shouldn't go off. I'm just afraid that there might be an accident, so I need to rely on your reaction to create a diversion. When Xiao Liqing heard this, he frowned slightly and stared at him for a while. Then he asked, what the hell? You're saying that you've prepared for it? That it can even avoid the detector? Chen Yuding smiled and nodded at him. Yes, that's indeed what we've been doing, and it's been successful. But don't worry, we won't let them use this potion casually, so it won't be leaked to the outside world. It meant that they would only distribute it to the person in charge of the mission during a special mission, so these drugs would not be leaked to the outside world, and would not be taken by the wild zombies outside. Therefore, it would not pose a threat to the human base. Xiao Liqing looked at him in surprise. You even made this kind of thing? You're pretty fast. Thinking from the perspective of the universal life base, one could also understand the effects of this drug on the army in their second base. Chen Yuding patted him on the shoulder and said, you should know the two who are going in now, Jing Yan and Yan Xiao. Keep an eye on him. After that, he walked back and gestured to the car behind him. The supplies they were transporting were delivered in 5 military trucks. All 5 trucks were filled with fresh fruits, vegetables, and all kinds of food ingredients. After Lu Jun's careful management, there were also a large number of zombie soldiers who were cultivating and managing the land. The land that had been soaked in Lin Xiao's lake water was very rich in crops. Moreover, the harvested output completely exceeded the consumption of all the survivors in the base, so the surplus was sent to Haicheng. This caused one of the leaders of Haicheng, Zhou Shihui, to start thinking about taking over the base. But this had to be done by Wu Chengyue, and he still had to get this guy to quickly marry her. That way, it would be easier to talk to them if they became a family. After seeing Chen Yuding's signal, Jing Yan and Yan Xiao both got out of the car. The two of them were still wearing the camouflage combat uniform and had their hair tied up and wore sunglasses. Xiao Liqing, who often interacted with them, was already used to these zombies wearing sunglasses at night. But for the Haicheng soldiers guarding the gate, they looked at the two women a few more times. But they only looked at them a few more times, and then didn't pay much attention to them. Wearing sunglasses in the middle of the night, although it was quite strange. But if the sunglasses were special equipment, then it was normal. It seemed like the kind with night vision. The two girls walked in front of Xiao Liqing and Chen Yuding, and greeted Xiao Liqing. How is it? Can we go in? Chen Yuding turned his head and glanced at Xiao Liqing, then turned his head to the two girls and nodded. Jing Yan and Yan Xiao immediately turned and walked towards the gate, and behind them, Xiao Liqing and Chen Yuding both stared at them. They watched the two of them enter the pedestrian detection channel, and then the detector didn't make any noise. After watching the two of them successfully enter, they waited for 3 seconds, and there was still no movement. Chen Yuding and Xiao Liqing both inexplicably let out a sigh of relief. Okay, now we know the answer, no problem. You seem to be a little nervous. Didn't you guys prepare? Xiao Liqing turned around and said to Chen Yuding. Chen Yuding sighed helplessly, but said in a relaxed mood, it's the same as a maneuver and an assessment. Even if you pass the maneuver accurately, you will pass it anyway. Even if you pass the drill correctly, when it comes to the real exam, won't you still be nervous? Xiao Liqing shrugged. Well, that's true. The two zombie beauties managed to sneak into the naval base without the knowledge of the human soldiers of Haicheng. After the supply trucks passed through the detection channel, Xiao Liqing and Chen Yuding also went in and closed the door. After entering, Yan Xiao said in a low voice with some excitement, "I used to hide in the leader's space to come in. I didn't expect to be able to come in through the main gate. This feels so good." Jing Yin leaned back on the back of the car seat and glanced at her calmly. She said expressionlessly, "What's there to be excited about? If you want to come in, there are ways. It just feels different." Yan Xiao looked at her and said with a smile. After their convoy entered, on the roof of a building a kilometer away from the side door, two figures were hiding in the dark with night vision binoculars. But at this time, the person holding the binoculars put down the binoculars and said, "They're here, but they only stay for 1 or 2 days each time, then immediately leave at night. And this time, the person in charge has changed from a level 5 psychic to a level 6. I don't know if they have a premonition of something." Chapter 1338. When Chen Yuding escorted the supplies to Sea City, the next day, Lin Feng found Dong Lijia and talked to him about recruiting members from their corpse hunting team. "Only recommending members from our team? Do you want the other members who came with us?" Dong Lijia sat opposite Lin Feng and asked him. "Yes, of course we want them. However, if it's not someone from your own team, but someone from another team, we'll lower our conditions a little." Lin Feng, who was sitting with his back straight like a soldier, nodded. His expressionless face was not surprised by Dong Lijia's question. Since they were here to poach people from their corpse hunting team, they naturally had to give them some compensation. So if Dong Lijia and the others were willing to recommend their members to them, they would naturally give corresponding compensation to their corpse hunting team. For example, the base's contribution points, zombie cores, energy cores, resources, etc., would be distributed to them according to the number of members. But if they recommended members from other teams, then the base's compensation to this corpse hunting team would naturally be lower. "Oh, this is a difference in treatment." Dong Lijia listened and looked at Lin Feng with a smile. He couldn't help but ask him again, "Then will their treatment be worse than our members?" Lin Feng shook his head. "No, we will give everyone the same treatment. It's just that the compensation for your team will be different. After all, the members of March were trained by you. We are basically poaching people from March. And the other corpse hunting teams were not trained by you. You didn't invest any resources in them, right? So you don't need us to compensate you, right? Am I right?" "That's true. All right, I'll help you with this matter. Let's see if anyone from our team is willing to join your base's army. After all, it will be a huge consumption to support so many people." Dong Lijia smiled and nodded, and Lin Feng only planned to poach people from their team. He didn't intend to recruit the entire team. Because he didn't know if the other party had this intention, he still had to greet them. "Of course, if the core members of your team are also willing to join, we will also welcome them." He looked at Dong Lijia and cautiously threw out an olive branch. Dong Lijia didn't take it directly. Instead, he continued to smile at him and nodded. "Well, we don't have this intention yet. If we change our mind in the future, we will consider joining your base's army, but I don't know if it will still be counted by then." Lin Feng nodded. "Of course it will. As long as you are willing, you can join anytime." "Thank you." Dong Lijia smiled and nodded. Lin Feng placed the contract on his desk and said, "The contract is all here. You can discuss it with the others before making a decision." Lin Feng, Dong Lijia. As he spoke, he stood up, and Dong Lijia stood up as well. After sending him out, Dong Lijia sat back down and took the document he had given him. He opened it and looked at it carefully. After Feng finished reading the document, Lin Feng said, "Lin Feng is Dong Will. Ming Feng Dong Feng and Dong Will." After reading the document, Dong Xinxin said, "If we join the army, we will lose our initiative and be restrained. I don't think it's necessary. Anyway, we have already joined this base. If the base is in danger, we will face it together. So it's not suitable for us to join their army." Her own regiment had its own organization, and if she joined the base's army, she would have no choice. If they joined the base's army, it would be impossible for them to maintain their own system. It would disrupt their original core. Also, if they joined the army, they would be restrained by military rules and regulations. That would make them lose a lot of freedom. However, there were also benefits if he joined the army. He would receive compensation from the base and so on. They would have their own resources, and they could rely on their own strength to obtain other resources. They didn't need to join the army to survive. I agree. Deng Qianfei didn't say anything. He looked at Dong Xinxin and nodded in agreement. Me too. Luo Yuanjun nodded. I say, can't the two of you have your own opinions? Don't just follow Xinxin's words, okay? Dong Lijia looked at the two men in disgust. TSK, it has nothing to do with me, right? Don't blame it on me. Dong Xinxin rolled his eyes at him, crossed his arms and leaned back on the sofa. Since we don't want to join, let's send some people to them. After all, the number of soldiers in this base is pitifully small. Dong Lijia thought about it and made a decision. The first benefit of joining the army was contribution points. Every month, they could get energy cores, weapons, meal tickets, dormitories, and so on. For the people at the bottom of the corpse hunters group, they might only be attracted by contribution points and energy cores. After all, although the missions in the corpse hunters group were dangerous, they didn't have to worry about food and clothing. But contribution points and energy cores were more difficult. Energy cores were easy to get, as they could be obtained by making contributions in the corpse hunters group. But contribution points could only be obtained by doing work for the base. Contribution points could be exchanged for all other resources. This was the same in any base. So as long as Dong Lijia spread the news to his group, most people would definitely be tempted. What do you think? Dong Lijia looked at the three of them. Dong Xinxin shrugged. I don't have an opinion. Deng Qianfei shook his head silently. No. Luo Yuanjun also shook his head. Dong Lijia said, all right, I'll send someone to send the news. Let's see when Lin Feng has time to come for the signing meeting. Jing Yan and Yin Xiao waited for Chen Yuding to hand over the supplies in Haicheng. Then they walked around the base for 2 days. On the second night, they gathered together and returned home. Not long after leaving Haicheng, when they were about 30 to 40 kilometers away, Jing Yan and Yin Zhao's expressions suddenly turned cold. The two of them looked at each other, and then ordered the driver, keep driving. Then the two zombies opened the door while the car was still moving. One jumped onto the roof of Chen Yuding's car, and the other disappeared in a flash. Yin Xiao knelt on the roof of the car, bent over and patted Chen Yuding's window. Chen Yuding lowered the window and looked up. What's the situation? There are people blocking the road in front, about 100 people. Yin Xiao sniffed the air in front and reported to Chen Yuding. Chen Yuding nodded. Got it. Then he took out his communicator and said to the team, everyone on alert, prepare for battle. Chapter 1339. Hearing Chen Yuding's order, everyone immediately pulled out their guns and were on full alert. The speed of the convoy did not change, but continued to move forward at the same speed. At this time, Jing Yan had already led a group of zombies forward. Following the scent of living people, she made a hand signal to her subordinates to conceal their presence. Then when they were a few hundred meters away from the other party, she stopped, stood on a high vantage point, and looked around, then turned around, and went around to the side. However, the speed at which she led her people was very fast. In the dark of the night, because the night wind was already very loud, the sound of Jing Yan's people moving quickly could not be heard at all. When they were about 200 meters away from the other party, Jing Yan raised her hand and made another hand signal to her subordinates. Following that, the team members behind her quietly spread out in all directions, forming a large semicircle around the unknown group of people. Because they were more than 200 meters away from the other party, they temporarily surrounded half of the direction. At this time, Jing Yan's figure flashed and went towards a person in front of her. When she was less than 10 meters away from the other party, she stopped. She tried to conceal her presence as much as possible, then carefully stared at the direction of the other party. Although the other party was also concealing their presence, it was not to an extreme extent. Maybe it was because they were still a short distance away from Chen Yuding's team, so they did not enter a state of battle preparation. Therefore, their presence was somewhat leaked. Jingyan quietly approached them. Based on their aura, she slowly determined that the strongest ability user in the group was only a rank 6. There were about 10 level 5 metahumans. The rest were level 3 or 4 metahumans, and some ordinary people. These people appeared in the middle of the night on the road that they had to pass on their way back to the base, and they were even hiding in the shadows on both sides while concealing their presence. It was obvious that they wanted to ambush them. Jingyan did not directly go near them, but instead found a place 20 to 30 meters away to hide, then stretched her ears and began to listen for their movements. As long as the direction of the wind did not change, the wind would still carry some sound. Moreover, Zombie's hearing was already very strong, and as she rose to level 6, her hearing naturally became stronger. She first wanted to find out who this group of people were, and she guessed that they were most likely from China. Jingyan thought to herself as she closed her eyes and stretched her ears to listen to their conversation. Reporting, the target is 2 kilometers away. Continue to keep an eye on them. Come back and report as soon as you are within 1 kilometer. Yes. After a gust of wind blew past, the intermittent voice came again. Are you sure you can deal with Qin Yuding? He's a rank 6 arcanist. Even though he's an earth type, his attack power isn't weak. Don't worry. I'm just luring him away, not fighting to the death. I'm just messing up their plan. I think if you want to pretend to be a robber, you should at least pretend to be one. You should know the style of those robbers. I got it. Jingyan didn't get a complete understanding of their conversation, but she was able to glean a lot of information from their conversation. They were actually pretending to be bandits to intercept them, but it didn't seem like they were going to annihilate them all. What did that mean? From the amount of information that Jingyan heard, she felt that this was probably a trap. There might be other tricks up his sleeves. Qin Yuding's team was getting closer and closer. When they were within 1 kilometer, Jingyan suddenly flashed away. Then, she suddenly stopped a few hundred meters away and hid in the dark, waiting quietly. After a few seconds, 2 figures were moving quickly and quietly towards her. Their purpose was obviously to go back and report to the people who were ambushing them. It was just that one of them was a Logia, and the other was a wind type. Both of them were only rank 4. Jingyan looked for the trajectory of the 2 people and found the highest point to hide on. The moment the 2 people rushed past her position, she suddenly swooped down from the top and pounced on one of them at an extremely fast speed. At the same time, her fingers pierced through the other person's skull. She pierced through the enemy's skull, and before she landed on the ground, she disappeared again in a flash. Then, before the second enemy realized that his comrade had been killed, she quickly appeared behind him in a flash. Puff dash, the second person heard a strange sound from his companion. He couldn't help but turn his head to look, but he didn't see his companion following them. Just as he was in a daze and wanted to look for his companion again, a figure had quietly flashed behind him. A zombie's claw instantly pierced through his heart. Ugh dash, the male wind-type ability user stood stiffly on the tree. His eyes were wide open as he looked down in disbelief at the human claw that had pierced through his chest. Then he slowly turned his head and looked behind him, only to see a pair of dark zombie eyes with 2 red beads. Then, before he could recover, he felt a sharp pain on his head. Then his vision blurred, and his consciousness dissipated. Kacha dash, Jingyan ripped off his skull and took out the energy core. He swiftly collected all the weapons and equipment he had on him. Then, he went to collect the equipment of the first player he had just killed. After doing this, she immediately turned around and quickly flashed towards Qin Yuding's team. After seeing Jingyan appear, Qin Yuding's team immediately stopped. He asked her, "How is it? Who are they?" Jingyan had already put on her sunglasses again. She stood in front of him and said expressionlessly, 1 kilometer ahead. There are people on both sides of the road. It's the Chinese again. But this time, their goal isn't to wipe us out. Instead, they want to pretend to be robbers and create chaos. Then they will send people to our team to hide. That way, they can smoothly sneak into our base. Qin Yuding had a thoughtful expression when he heard this. Looks like Sikongchen is now using infiltration to continue sneaking into our base, to find out more about us. Then he asked, "How strong are these people?" Jing Yin said, "There are 135 of them. 1 level 6 ability user, 10 level 5 ability users. There are 50 to 60 normal people, and the rest are level 3 or 4 ability users. There are plenty of weapons, and they are all new ones. Look." As she said this, she took out the weapons she had just collected and placed them on the hood of the car for him to see. These weapons are the new Chinese energy guns, and their attack power is several times greater than a normal handgun. Also, the range is much longer. Chapter 1340. Just a rank 6 metahuman? At least he was in the top 100 last time. Are you trying to mess with us this time? Chen Yuding could not help but laugh when he heard Jing Yan's description of the opponent's strength. At this time, Yin Xiao jumped down from the side and said, "He probably doesn't want to fight us head-on. Whether it was hard or soft, he always failed." Jing Yin looked at Chen Yuding and asked, "What do you plan to do?" Chen Yuding immediately said, "The two of you will lead a team to ambush them from both sides. Since they want to pretend to be robbers, then pretend to be a zombie horde and play with them. I will continue to advance along the original route. The two of you will first gather the nearby wild zombies. Then, when they are ready to move, strike first. Remember what our standards are. Don't let a single one escape." "I know." Yin Xiao smiled and tilted her head. Jing Yin nodded and immediately said, "Then let's move now." After saying that, she immediately disappeared in a flash, and Yin Xiao quickly left with her. Chen Yuding went back into the car, and the convoy continued to move forward. Because the 2 scouts that were watching the base were killed by Jing Yan, the Chinese people that were lying in ambush did not know where Chen Yuding and the others were. However, while the level 6 arcanist was waiting for news, he was also estimating the approximate speed of Chen Yuding and the others at the same time, estimating their current location. But because he was more focused on waiting for the scouts to come back and report more accurately, he did not pay much attention to the rough prediction in his heart, and missed some things. When he felt that the person who should have reported back had not returned, he became suspicious. Suddenly, he heard the roar of zombies coming from both sides. Roar. The 2 zombies' roars were loud and long, as if they were transmitting something. The attention of the Chinese people was attracted, because the 2 roars were too close to them. What's going on? Are they intermediate zombies or advanced zombies? I don't know. But something is wrong. How can there be 2 of them at the same time? And this sound seems to be gathering zombies. Something is wrong. There shouldn't be any zombies on this road. The zombies in this area should have been killed long ago. Maybe they came from somewhere else. The few of you, go and see what's going on. I feel that these 2 zombies want to cause trouble. Yes, appearing in such a place where they shouldn't appear. The purpose of these 2 zombies was definitely not simply passing by. Just when he was distracted by this sudden situation, Chen Yuding and his men had already approached with full vigilance. However, he did not let the convoy rush over immediately. Instead, he stopped 300 to 400 meters away. The people sent by the Chinese side to investigate the situation on both sides quickly found a large number of zombies gathering in the distance. Moreover, they were not the kind that walked over slowly. They had ferocious faces, brandishing their claws and baring their fangs as they ran over at an extremely fast speed. Some of them were even lying on the ground, crawling on all fours like wild beasts. Their speed was not slow either. However, they couldn't find any traces of the zombies that issued the call. They could only see the zombies madly swarming towards them from afar. The person who came to investigate immediately felt that something was wrong. He turned around and ran back. He reported the situation to the leader. "There is a small number of zombies on the left that are surrounding us. The same situation on the right." Soon, the person who went to investigate on the other side also came back and reported the same thing. "Are they coming for us?" Their squadron leader, who was also the man who persuaded the undercover agent in Haiqing to carry out this mission, asked with a gloomy expression. Looking at the direction, "They are coming for us, but we can't be sure whether they are coming for us or not." The person who went to investigate the situation said to him. The man who originally planned to take advantage of the chaos to sneak into the base's team rolled his eyes and suddenly said, "Actually, these zombies came at the right time. Let them attack the base's team. In this way, you guys can follow from behind and add fuel to the fire. I think I will have a better chance of sneaking over. Anyway, don't you guys all have medicine to block the zombies? They probably won't attack you guys. Whether these zombies are coming for us or not, hurry up and drink the medicine." The squadron leader immediately gave the order. Then he looked at the man and said, "It seems that this is also fate. If you can't even find a chance to sneak in, then I don't think you are qualified to go to China." The two of them thought very well, but soon they found that they were wrong. 2 minutes later, a large number of zombies immediately appeared in the distance around them. "What's going on? Didn't we all drink the medicine? Who didn't drink it?" Seeing the horde of zombies rushing towards them, the company leader immediately looked at his subordinates in shock and shouted out loudly, "No, no, no." Several voices immediately answered his question, indicating that everyone had drunk the medicine according to the order. "Then why are they still rushing towards us?" The squadron leader shouted angrily and then gave the order again. "Start fighting." Therefore, Chen Yuding and the others who were a few hundred meters away heard all kinds of gunshots, explosions and so on coming from the front. "Want to pretend to be robbers to deal with us? Then let's get through this zombie horde first." Chen Yuding stood in front of the car and leaned against it, holding a new type of Chinese gun in his hand, and looked left and right as he spoke. On the battlefield in front of them, Jing Yan and Yin Xiao looked at each other, then split up and quietly attacked the squadron leader from the left and right. The zombies that the two of them brought from Sentient Base's second base Legion had their eyes on the 10 level 5 metahumans. Among them, there was a shadow that hid his presence and then sneaked towards the direction of the road where Chen Yuding and the others were. This metahuman had some special skills. His ability was Logia, but he was an insect-type metahuman. Moreover, this insect was a type of camouflage in nature, a type of praying mantis. Although this praying mantis was only a level 5 metahuman, his ability was very special, and it was also a camouflage type. It was the most suitable for gathering intelligence. That was why Wei Haichao wanted him to sneak into Sentient Base's supply escort team, and then sneak into the city. Because of this, not only could he hide his presence and body, but he could also evade the detection of some machines. Wherever he wanted to go, it was as if there was no one there. In other words, no one would be able to detect him. However, those who were 2 levels higher than him could still sense his aura. Chapter 1341. Although the Mantis Paranormal told the Chinese that it would be extremely dangerous and difficult to sneak into this team, he was not that nervous. However, he wasn't that nervous. He was very confident in his stealth skills. It was just that the Chinese were not clear about his abilities. In addition, he had also drunk the drug that the Chinese developed to make the zombies dislike the smell, so he was not worried about being attacked by the zombies. So if he wanted to take the opportunity to sneak into their team, he was very confident that he would succeed. As for showing the difficulty to the other party, it was just to get better treatment in China after the mission was completed. Jing Yan, who was preparing to sneak attack the company leader, suddenly signaled Yin Xiao to stop. Yin Xiao looked at her with a puzzled expression. Jing Yan pointed behind her. There was a strange smell that was quietly sneaking towards Chen Yuding's team. It was said to be a strange smell, but it was because these people drank some kind of drug that suddenly changed the smell on their bodies. This was the drug that the Chinese developed to deal with the zombies, but it did not mean that their smell would completely disappear. It just changed into a different kind of smell. It was like in the human sense of smell, roasted meat on the table suddenly changed into raw meat with a slightly rotten smell. That was why the zombies lost interest in hunting them. However, in the eyes of zombies like Jing Yan, who had the intelligence of a normal person, of course she would not ignore them like the ordinary zombies. Jing Yan signaled Yin Xiao, and the two of them split up. She wanted to see what kind of ability this person had to be so confident to sneak into their team. As for the company leader, he was only a level 6 paranormal. Yen Xiao still had the ability to deal with him, so she would let her deal with him first. She would come back later to see if the situation needed help. Yen Xiao signaled to her that she understood, and continued to move towards the company leader. Jing Yan turned around, and quickly chased after the person who was sneaking towards Chen Yuding's team. After following the smell to a position very close to the person, Jing Yan first looked around suspiciously, then she jumped over the person's scent, and stopped a little bit in front of it. She stood on a short building, leaning against the wall, and looked down in one direction. In the end, he realized that he couldn't see anything. Apart from the grayish-white color of the scene in her eyes, everything else was very clear. However, when she stared at the source of the smell, she couldn't see any trace of the person. No wonder China only sent one person to carry out the infiltration operation. It turned out that this person had a special skill. The man had completely concealed his presence and figure, but he might not have known that his scent was exposed to Jing Yan's nose. Jing Yan also hid herself in the darkness, carefully observing the movement of the smell. Although she could smell where the person was, the range was only a few meters, so she couldn't accurately capture the person's location. If he wanted to kill his opponent directly, he wouldn't be able to do it accurately. After smelling the invisible person moving again, Jing Yan did not make any other reaction. Instead, he continued to follow the man in the dark, and watched him successfully sneak into the back of one of the military trucks, without Chen Yuding noticing. These military trucks were originally used to transport supplies. After arriving at Sea City, the supplies were all unloaded, so the back of the truck was empty. There used to be more than a dozen soldiers inside, but now the soldiers got out of the truck and stood guard. Jing Yan glanced at the truck from afar and sneered in her heart. Then, she suddenly appeared in front of Chen Yuding, and before he could react, she whispered in his ear, "There's a mouse sneaking into the back of the 4th military truck." Chen Yuding suddenly turned his head to look at her, a little surprised. However, neither he nor Jing Yan turned back to look at the 4th military truck. Instead, they acted as if they didn't pay attention to the 4th truck. How is that possible? Why didn't I sense his presence? A special ability user? When did he go in? Chen Yuding frowned, and asked her in a low voice after he recovered from his surprise. Jing Yan said, "It's indeed a special ability user. He went in a minute ago. Not to mention that you can't see him. Even I followed his scent all the way and didn't see him. I think he should be the same type as Captain L. March." Chen Yuding nodded and said, "Since it's a little mouse, we can't directly make a move on the truck. We have to find a way to force him out of the truck, but we can't let him escape. After all, if they directly made a move on the truck, it might cause them to lose a truck. Throw a gas bomb at him." Chen Yuding turned his head and said to Jing Yan. Jing Yan immediately nodded, and turned around to get a gas bomb. Now that they were in a normal place, the other party obviously wouldn't wear a gas mask or anything. As long as the other party was human, they would definitely react to the gas bomb. The Mantis ability user was squatting in the back of the 4th military truck. He thought to himself that his mission was more than half completed. Now he just needed to wait for the truck to drive into the base. Then he would be able to enter smoothly. Why didn't China send someone like him, who had a special invisibility ability, to carry out this kind of mission? For him, this was the simplest and most proficient task. However, those idiots from China only knew how to make him wait, saying that it wasn't the right time to do anything unnecessary, lest he was exposed. He had never failed to find out what he wanted to find out. It should be known that the information that the Sea City cultivation base could not be planted on the land was also obtained by him. Otherwise, the people from China would continue to be deceived by the pretense made up by Wu Qingyue, Xiao Yunlong, and Zhou Shihui. At this moment, suddenly a smoke bomb was thrown into the truck from the outside, and a strong and pungent gas instantly filled the entire truck. The Mantis ability user was shocked, and quickly covered his nose and jumped out. As a result, a large net suddenly fell from the sky and trapped him. Plop! An invisible figure wrapped in a large net made of hemp rope fell to the ground behind the truck. The shape of the net immediately exposed the invisible person, Bang, bang, bang. As soon as he fell to the ground, 3 gunshots immediately rang out, and 3 bullets hit the middle of the net. You guys. With a muffled groan, a figure appeared in the middle of the net. He rolled on the ground and stared in disbelief at Chen Yuding, who was withdrawing his gun. He wanted to ask something, but before he could finish his words, his whole body was paralyzed. Dead. Chapter 1342. After the death of the mantis metahuman, Jing Yan immediately left the place and quickly headed towards Yan Zhao's direction. Faced with 2 elite level 5 zombie teams and a group of over 1,000 wild zombies, the 100+ people from China were naturally not able to escape the fate of being wiped out. In the end, other than the energy cores being dug out, the rest also fell into the mouths of the wild ordinary zombies. Chen Yuding and the rest did not delay for long and continued back to the base. After returning to the base, they handed in the report the next morning. Lin Feng frowned when he saw that they had been ambushed last night. As expected, China's movements were getting more frequent. They were actually able to make a move on the team escorting the supplies. Moreover, with this first ambush, there would probably be another one, and another one after that. Moreover, the other party had already started to send out special type metahumans. It was likely that they would also send people with special abilities next time. Special metahumans that could turn invisible and avoid the detection of various machines, and even hide their aura, were definitely not lacking. China's population was huge. There would be all kinds of people with special abilities. I feel that Xikongchen is finally getting serious. We are still able to defend against this, but Haiqing might leak out. After all, there are too many people around Leader Wu who know about our secret. Chen Yuding's expression was also much more serious than usual. Xikongchen would definitely increase the focus of his special abilities to deal with Haiqing. If they were to discover the secret of the base from Haiqing, then not only would their base be in danger, Haiqing, which had a close relationship with their base, would also be in danger. After all, there were still 800,000 to 900,000 survivors in Haiqing. If they were to find out about this, it would definitely cause an internal uproar. At that time, even if the 3 leaders wanted to suppress them, it would be more difficult. They could not possibly suppress them with force, right? The consequences would only be more severe. Lin Feng sighed. This day will come. Now that the leader hasn't returned, we can only prepare for the worst as soon as possible. Send a message to Wu Qingyue and see what he is prepared to do. The worst-case scenario was for the zombie army in the base to be discovered by others, and then they would not care about how the humans outside the base would view them. The human survivors in the base would probably start a civil war. At that time, if they were to attack from both inside and outside, it would be troublesome to deal with them. It was better to resolve the civil war that had yet to germinate. After all, half of them were humans, and the other half were zombies. Paper would not be able to contain fire one day. Since they were going to be exposed no matter what, it was better to let them react first and deal with the humans in their base. Chen Yuding heard his words and saw that his expression had suddenly become fierce. He couldn't help but ask doubtfully, worst case scenario? You mean? After some thought, Qingyi furrowed his brows. You're thinking of making an internal announcement first? Brainwash them? But isn't this too risky? Since it was called brainwashing, of course, they would use all kinds of methods to implement it. At that time, whether it was through coercion, bribery, or death threats, he would use any means necessary to make these people accept the existence of the second base army. However, if he revealed this information to them, would they agree to it? What if he had a guilty conscience? This was really too risky. After all, the survivors who joined the base were all humans. And human thoughts were sometimes very stubborn and paranoid. That's our top priority. If it still doesn't work, we'll have to deal with it. If it still doesn't work, then in order to keep the secret of the base forever, they only have 2 choices. However, this matter still needs to wait for the leader to come back to make the final decision, and it won't be implemented immediately until the last moment. We should think about how to strengthen the secrecy. Lin Feng nodded to him expressionlessly. Chen Yuding thought at this time. Fortunately, when they joined the base, they all signed the agreement. The initiative is still on our side. When the base was just established, their leader had already implemented the implementation of the confidentiality agreement after the survivors joined the base. No matter what the background of this base was, they couldn't reveal the information here. Only in this way could they enjoy a well-fed and comfortable life here. But we can slowly start with the army first. Just treat it as psychological counseling. Like other people, we can slowly infiltrate them. Lin Feng put his finger on the table and gently tapped it, thinking about it before saying. To be honest, on the side of the first base army, there were already a few people who knew about this. However, if they wanted to continue to do psychological counseling, they still had to choose. Chen Yuding said, "Why don't we discuss this matter with the people in the second base and ask for their opinion?" Lin Feng nodded. "I think so too. Let's send the news to them first. Prepare for the meeting tonight. But the news to Leader Wu and Haiqing should be sent as soon as possible." Chen Yuding stood up. "I understand, I'll do it now." When Xiao Lily, Elmar, and the others received the news, all of them showed a surprised expression. On the roof, Xiao Lily was nestled in the arms of Lin Kuei, who was in the form of a black panther, and said in surprise, "Do you think Lin Feng's plan is too risky?" Their first reaction was that it was too risky. After all, if all the survivors in the base knew about this, then wouldn't it be the same as magnifying the chances of the information being leaked? Lin Kuei shook one of his ears and said, he was talking about the last stage. What he meant was, if there were only zombies in our base and no humans, then as long as we do a good job of protection, there would definitely be no chance of the information being leaked. But now half of us are humans, and the other half are zombies. Both sides live together, and one day, the humans will discover the secret of our second base. Then, if we are discovered without knowing, and the other side secretly spreads the news, then the danger of having a traitor in our base will cause a situation where we can't react in time. I think he wants to control the humans in the base first, and try to avoid the situation of a traitor being undercover as much as possible. Because if we act first, we still have a lot of initiative. As the saying goes, it's hard to guard against a thief in the house. Hearing this, Qiu Lily understood a little. Oh, so that's it. She looked in the direction of the north, and a strong red light flashed in her ruby-like eyes. It seems that the first battle for the survival of our base is about to begin. I hope Xiao Qiao can come back soon. Chapter 1343. Lin Kuei flicked his tail and turned his head to lick her hand. Don't worry, we won't be exposed that easily. Even if the people in the base discover us, we won't let them leak the news. But we still need to take precautions so that we are mentally prepared and won't be caught unprepared. Qiu Lily shrugged her shoulders and said, That's true. Even if the whole world knows that our base is a zombie base, we won't be afraid. At worst, we'll just chase all the humans out. Even if we are zombies, we have our right to live. Humph. Just as Lin Feng was about to make a plan to prevent the base from leaking out, a female nurse in the medical center was quietly searching for something in Lin Hao's office. This female nurse was an ordinary person and not a psychic. But she was able to successfully sneak into Lin Hao's office because she had been watching Lin Hao's working hours for a long time. Lin Hao was currently investigating Du Yuanqing's situation in the isolation zone for psychics, so she had the time to come here to look for something. After rummaging through the filing cabinet for a while, she suddenly saw a secret compartment behind the documents she had pushed open. The female nurse was delighted, thinking to herself, Why would I be afraid of not being able to find you? While thinking happily, she reached out to touch the secret compartment. After digging and pressing for a while, she finally opened the door of the secret compartment. But when she saw the situation inside, her face sank. Because there was a keyhole inside, a key was needed to open it. The female nurse remembered that Lin Hao always carried a bunch of keys on him, but he would only put them aside when he was undergoing surgery. If she wanted to get the keys, she would have to wait until he was undergoing surgery. She closed the secret compartment in annoyance, then put the documents back in place. After searching for a long time, she couldn't find anything, so she could only leave unwillingly. After leaving Lin Hao's office, she quickly ran to the monitoring room. The security guards on duty in the monitoring room were currently lying on the table in deep sleep. After the female nurse covered her face and entered, she quickly turned on the monitoring system. Then she quickly left the adjacent room, and before leaving, she took out a glass bottle of medicine and poured it in. When the liquid in the glass bottle came into contact with the air, it immediately emitted a pile of yellow smoke. At the same time, it also gave off a pungent smell. The smoke in the monitoring room disappeared after 2 minutes, and the security guards slowly woke up after a few more minutes. They woke up in a daze. Their eyes glazed over for more than 10 seconds before they gradually woke up. How did I fall asleep? The first security guard who woke up looked left and right in confusion. In the end, he found that the other 3 were also sleeping. He immediately stood up and patted the others. Hey, wake up. Why are you all asleep? The others were soon woken up by him. The few of them looked around, and then at the monitor screen. There was nothing unusual, so they all thought that it was because they didn't sleep well last night. Maybe because I didn't sleep well last night. I've been very sleepy today. Still sleepy, the other guard said, yawning again. They didn't realize that they were a little slow when they just woke up, so they didn't realize why they fell asleep together. That night Lin Feng, Elmar, Qiu Lily, and the others were having a meeting. They were discussing the matter of brainwashing the survivors in the base. What I mean is to wait until the truth is out of control before we implement it. Of course, we can't implement it right now. However, I also want to choose a small portion of the people in the base to brainwash them. But I want people from your side to come over and give them one-on-one psychological counseling. Let them see your true identities. I think it'll be more effective this way. Lin Feng explained to the others who were sitting around. Elmar placed her elbows on the table and looked at him thoughtfully. Do we have to do this? What if they seem to be obedient on the surface, but resist on the inside? We don't have the ability to sense each other's thoughts like leader, so it's not easy to make a judgment. As long as one of them successfully spreads the news, it will be a huge disaster for us. Lin Feng said, I will choose the people in the army based on the situation, and there won't be many of them. Let's see how the first batch reacts first, then consider whether we should continue with this or not. Elmar thought about it. Although she felt that it was a little inappropriate to do this, it seemed that Lin Feng had already made up his mind. Considering that this was only the testing phase, and only a small group of people were chosen for the test, it was still within the scope of control. The rest of the procedures would have to be decided when their leader returned. She looked at Qiu Lily and Lin Kuei and asked, What do you guys think? Qiu Lily didn't think as much as she did, but she said straightforwardly, Anyway, the people living with us will find out sooner or later. So why not give them a heads up earlier? It'll save them from overreacting and doing something troublesome later on. Furthermore, we can't hide like this forever. Our army will one day appear in this era in broad daylight. And we don't have to wear sunglasses all day long to hide ourselves. Then she continued, Besides, even if we become zombies, we still have the right to live. But we also have the right to live, and we will not take the initiative to harm them. If they discriminate against us or gather to attack us, then let them come. We're not afraid of them. After saying that, she raised her chin and snorted coldly. Elmar looked at her speechlessly. Be careful of Sikong Chun throwing a missile at our base. Can you stop his missile? Qiu Lily stuck out her tongue. It's just a missile. I could have intercepted it in midair. Besides, why do we have to wait until they bomb us with missiles before we can retaliate? Wuxia is always targeting us. We should take the initiative to attack. Elmar was speechless. After thinking about it, why did they have to be afraid of those humans? If they were to talk about an army, not to mention the number of zombies in the whole country, just the number of zombies in a province would be enough to flood Huaxia's base. Why would they be afraid of his missile? Huaxia will be taken care of sooner or later, and Sikong Chun won't live for long. If our base can provide food and resources to the other bases, then they should be willing to sign a peace agreement with us, when they are short of food. After all, war will only cause more and more losses for humans, and the population will decrease. Under the premise that we can guarantee that we won't harm them, their wise choice is definitely not to start a war with us, Lin Feng said to them. Chapter 1344. Zombies weren't vegetarians, so the fruits and vegetables grown in the base were, of course, given to these humans. In this case, humans still didn't plan for their own future. Wasn't it too stupid to think about dealing with their base every day? That's true. Although they might discriminate against us, objectively speaking, humans are also selfish and ambitious creatures. In the current situation of food shortage, they will at least compromise with the food we provide on the surface. Lin Feng looked around and said, on the surface, they would accept it, but behind the scenes, they would definitely want more. Humans wouldn't just be satisfied with these things on the surface. You mean, signing a peace agreement with them is like water from a well, not water from a river? Elmar didn't expect Lin Feng to have already thought about what would happen after their base was completely exposed. Lin Feng shook his head. That's not what I'm thinking, leader. Therefore, the cultivation base in Wuxia wasn't just for the survivors in their base. Lin Xiao wanted to grow a large agricultural base. And then with this agricultural base, other bases would have to consider the value of this agricultural base first when dealing with them. Elmar and Xiao Lili both looked at each other, not knowing that Lin Xiao was thinking about this. Sure enough, as a leader, he really thought far ahead. While they were discussing this matter, the female nurse who had entered Lin Hao's office during the day quietly appeared in a room. There were other people in the room, and when they saw her, they immediately showed a look of anticipation. How is it? Did you find the woman's information? One of the men immediately stared at her and asked. The female nurse was wearing black casual clothes at this time. After she came in, she looked back outside and closed the door before walking over. She found a seat and sat down casually. I didn't find it, but I found a secret compartment, but I couldn't open it. It was locked. I think the thing locked inside should be the information that Lu Tianyu often went to the hospital to check some time ago, but I don't know how to unlock it. So there's no way to see what's inside. The female nurse said and spread her hands. This woman has changed too much from before. There must be something fishy. We must find out more about her. This information is very valuable. We can't get close to the cultivation base in Wuxia, but the hospital is a good place to start. But you have to be more vigilant, don't expose yourself. Another man looked at the female nurse and reminded. The nurse nodded. I understand. But even if we steal important information, I'm afraid it won't be easy to spread it. Lin Feng sent people to keep a close watch. I heard that as long as someone steps out of the base, they will be killed. Lin Feng would send people to follow them secretly to make sure that they wouldn't secretly trade information with people from other bases. The second base doesn't allow anyone to get close, but from a distance, it looks like an empty city. Why did they make an empty city? Who knows? There's a written rule that we can't get close, so if we're discovered, we'll be shot and executed. For the sake of safety, we can't get close to them for now. Is it really appropriate for us to do this now? On the surface, this base didn't seem to have many people and wasn't very strong. But look, whether it's Hidden Cloud City, Skyfire Base, or even China, none of them have been able to infiltrate this base. Moreover, he felt that there was a strange force behind that woman. Do you still remember the group of zombies we encountered outside the base when we first arrived? I feel that there is something wrong with this group of zombies. Something's definitely wrong. They seem to have some way to control the zombies. But now they're gone. Who knows where they've moved them? If we can find out what's going on, it'll be very valuable to China. The few of them talked one after another, while the nurse listened quietly and didn't interrupt. These were the people who'd entered from Hidden Cloud City or Earth Dragon. When they'd first arrived, they'd signed the agreement because of the pressure of survival. However, these people were not honest people. After settling down for a period of time, they began to have strange thoughts. To them, this was just a temporary place to stay. Their final destination was either Haiqing or China. No matter what, they'd choose to leave this base and join another one. Now that China was targeting Haiqing and the base, it meant the value of the information they'd receive was high. If they could get their hands on good information, they'd be able to get a lot of supplies and weapons from Haiqing. The way they saw it, if Xigongchen got serious about this base, he definitely wouldn't be able to hold on for long. It was better for them to throw out a few escape routes first. Let's not worry about anything else. Let's see how we can get Lin Hao's keys. Seeing these people getting further and further away, the nurse couldn't help but pull them back. No matter how valuable the secret of this base was, they'd have to get their hands on it to know. Before they knew what the secret of this base was, it was obviously useless to think about it. Then do you know where he put his keys? How do you want to get them? Someone asked her. The nurse said, he has a string of keys that he carries with him. I think it should be in there. The only time this string of keys leaves his side is when he's in surgery. Then does he take it home to sleep and shower? Someone asked her, puzzled. The nurse glanced at him. Then do you have the ability to sneak into his house? I don't have that ability anyway. The building where Lin Hao and the others lived had very tight security. Previously, some people had tried to sneak in, but they were either discovered before they could go upstairs, or they never came out after they went in. In any case, based on their observations, it was impossible to enter the residential area of that important person. It would definitely be more difficult than making a move in the hospital. As soon as she said that, the others fell silent. Then they said, all right then, let's make a move while he's in surgery. Lin Hao, who still didn't know the key string on his waist was being targeted, was standing outside Du Yuanqing's isolation room, looking at the situation inside through the glass. Du Yuanqing had a special electric ability, so at this moment, his entire body was flickering with layers of electric current. The bed he was lying on was specially made with insulators such as plastic and dry wood, and the entire isolation room was temporarily isolated with a layer of plastic, in case the electricity on his body suddenly exploded and electrified the entire hospital. How is it? Is the energy explosion about right? Lin Hao looked at Du Yuanqing lying inside for a while, then turned his head to ask the medical staff beside him. Chapter 1345. Looking at the data, it's almost there. I estimate that he should be able to break through within 4 hours. The medical staff beside him said to him. Lin Hao looked at Du Yuanqing inside, rejoicing in his heart that there was still a large amount of lake water left behind by his sister. After giving Du Yuanqing 3 cups of water, the electric current on his body was only limited to his body. It must be known that a few days ago when the electric current was acting up, everyone had to wear isolation suits and rubber gloves before they dared to touch him. They were also afraid that they would be electrocuted into slag if they were not careful. Finally, there's another level 6 arcanist. That's great. Lin Hao nodded, then suddenly sighed and said, there was no other way. The number of rank 6 metahumans in their base number 1 was just too few. Thinking about the number of rank 6 zombies in the second base, Lin Hao silently felt that the first base was really many times weaker than the other side. He didn't know when they would be able to reach the number of the other side. The medical staff looked at him and smiled, comforting him. There will be more and more in the future. And didn't we have more than 10,000 people now? There should be quite a few rank 6 metahumans in this group. Lin Hao thought about it, then nodded and said, that's true. The people who joined this time, there are more than 20 rank 6 metahumans. And just in the March Corpse hunting group, there are nearly 10 rank 6 metahumans. Wenwen really did a good thing. The medical staff thought that when he said Lin Wenwen did a good thing, he was referring to her bringing people over from Haicheng. But he didn't realize that Lin Hao was actually talking about what Lin Wenwen did 7 years ago, so that she would be able to receive the reward from this group of people. After confirming that there were still a few hours before Du Yuanqing's evolution would occur, Lin Hao first returned to his office. He wasn't a zombie, so he couldn't smell the scent left behind by someone entering his office. And that female nurse was also an ordinary person. She didn't have any ability, so she wouldn't have left behind the scent of ability energy. So Lin Hao didn't know that someone had entered his office to search for things not long ago. He took the energy amount of Du Yuanxing for the past 2 days, sat down and looked at it for a while, then put the information on the table and stood up. She turned around and walked to the file cabinet. She removed the files that were blocking the secret compartment. Then she took out a bunch of keys and unlocked the secret compartment. However, the secret compartment did not contain Lin Xiao's information as the nurse had thought. It only contained the energy data of the newly promoted paranormals in the base. After opening the door to the secret compartment, he turned around and placed Du Yuanxing's information inside, then locked it again. After arranging the files, he returned to his seat and started flipping through the other documents. In Haicheng, after confirming that the drug developed by Yan Huiguang and the Shuai-Ming army could evade the detection of the machines, Lin Feng immediately drew up a plan to send some people from the zombie army in Base 2 to infiltrate China. However, this could only be carried out after Lin Xiao returned and approved it. At this time, Lin Xiao was still trapped above the river. There seemed to be a magnetic field between the energy in the river and the energy above. As long as something passed through the middle, it would cause an energy tornado to descend. Lin Xiao looked at the tornadoes that were moving around each other at a very fast speed. She controlled the flames under her feet to avoid being hit by the moving tornadoes, while resisting the suction force produced by the tornadoes. It was very difficult to move to the other side of the river. If it was not for Lin Xiao's precise control, she would have been sucked in. Although the situation was somewhat dangerous, Lin Xiao still slowly moved towards the other side. At this time, a black shadow slowly emerged from the whirlpools in the river, and a sharp cry was heard. Zzz. Lin Xiao looked down and saw human-sized monsters standing up from the middle of the vortex. Then with a sudden leap, they leaped into the air. What's more, they miraculously passed through the tornadoes. Then, they moved through the tornadoes, as if they were swimming in water. And the direction they were moving in was all in Lin Xiao's direction. Fuck. How could there be such things? Seeing these new monsters, Lin Xiao could not help but curse in her heart. These things were not big, and were only slightly taller than humans. They were about 2 meters tall and looked like fish with fish heads, fish mouths, and fish gills. On both sides of their necks were 2 long fan-like fins. There was a row of bone spurs on their backs, and their tails were also very big. Their mouths were extremely large, split to both sides and filled with eerie teeth. On top of their heads was a mushroom-like crown, which looked very strange. But judging from their mouths full of sharp teeth, these things weren't cute at all. Zzz. After this group of flying fish suddenly jumped out, they moved freely in the tornadoes. They could stop in the tornadoes, as if the energy pillars of the tornadoes were supporting them. Lin Xiao narrowly avoided a flying fish monster that pounced on her from the side, and in the next second, she had to avoid another flying fish monster that pounced on her from behind. The situation, which was already not too good to begin with, suddenly escalated. What was more infuriating was that these strange fish monsters were very fast. As long as they retracted their chicken wing-like fins, they would immediately fly over like a sharp arrow. And as long as one of them did this, the others would immediately do the same. So in an instant, they would become a wave of flying fish arrows that rushed towards Lin Xiao. Even with her good control, she could not completely deal with it. What made Lin Xiao even more depressed was that these strange things were not afraid of her flame ability at all. Whoosh! Lin Xiao quickly hid in the space. The 2 rows of people waiting in front of the small building saw her come in, and thought that she had crossed to the other side of the river. They were all waiting for Lin Xiao to take them out. In the end, Lin Xiao helplessly sighed and said, "I'm trapped in the middle of the river. I can't go over, and I can't go back either." If it was just those moving energy tornadoes, she could slowly control her ability and slowly move over them. The problem was that the sudden appearance of these flying fish consumed a lot of her mental strength to deal with them. After all, these fish were much more agile than the energy pillars of the energy tornadoes. Hearing her say this, everyone immediately showed a blank expression and looked at each other. What? Even you can't go over? Yuan Tianqing looked at Lin Xiao from the next building. Although his voice was not loud, he knew that Lin Xiao could hear him. Lin Xiao turned to look at him and said, "Do you want me to take you out to see the current situation?" Yuan Tianqing immediately smiled and shook his head. "No, I'm basically crippled now. Do you want me to go out and be a snack for those things?" Chapter 1346. What's the situation outside? Hearing Lin Xiao's words, Duan Wan and the others understood that something unexpected had happened outside. Lin Xiao waved to them to temporarily disperse, then walked into the small building. As he walked, he said, "There is a magnetic field between the river and the energy layer above. It might be because of my appearance that the magnetic field was destroyed, so dense energy tornadoes fell from above. Moreover, these tornadoes are not stationary like the ones we saw before, they can run." Hearing Lin Xiao use the words dense can run, Duan Wan Li Zheng, and the others immediately imagined what it was like outside. That was an even crazier scene. The appearance of a group of tornadoes would definitely produce a suction force. And in the end, it was very likely to form a huge tornado, especially since the energy in the wind could not be touched. It was indeed not easy to pass through such a group of living tornadoes. Although everyone felt that it was indeed a bit difficult, they did not expect that even Lin Xiao, who was a level 8 zombie emperor, could not pass through. This was indeed a bit surprising. Lin Xiao could feel their doubts, so he explained, "If it was just these tornadoes, I could indeed pass through, but it would take a bit of time and energy. But after a group of flying fish jumped out from the river, I was a bit unable to do so. The underground creatures were all strange. He had seen a flying cat, and now there was a flying fish. Fish with crowns are also very ugly." Speaking of the last part, she could not help but ridicule. After all, among those fish, the mushroom-like crowns were very eye-catching. It was really not an ordinary kind of ugly fish. They can also fly. When the others heard that there was another type of flying fish, they were stunned for a moment. Then they felt that it was reasonable. After all, it was a river. It was normal for there to be fish. Actually, it was not strange for fish to be able to fly. After all, there were some fish that could jump in nature before the end of the world. Not to mention the mutated fish after the end of the world. Not only could they fly, but they could also run ashore. Is there a lot of them? What gave Lin Xiao a headache was that there might be a lot of them. And if they could fly, their speed would definitely be very fast. Lin Xiao nodded. Seeing that they had all come in, he pointed to the sofas and chairs around them, and asked them to sit down first. There are indeed a lot of them, and their flying speed is even faster than an arrow fired from a bow. These flying fish aren't weak either. There are at least 5 or 6 of them every day, so it's a little troublesome. Lin Xiao sat on the sofa and leaned against the back of the chair with his arms crossed in front of his chest. After she finished speaking, she squinted her eyes and looked at the changes outside the space. The flying fishes immediately began to fly around aimlessly, darting in and out of the tornadoes. After observing the situation outside, Lin Xiao opened his eyes and said, "I'll come in first to see if those things will disperse after losing their target. If it disperses, then I'll go out and take advantage of the gap. If it really doesn't disperse, then I can only try to force my way through." Anyway, if she really couldn't do it, she could only wrap herself in the flames of her special ability and rush over. Although it was not harmful to her body, it consumed too much of her ability. If he accidentally got sucked into the tornado, he would be sucked into the river below. That wouldn't be good for her. After Lin Xiao disappeared, the flying fishes in the river lost their target and began to aimlessly fly around. Their movements slowly calmed down. However, the situation of the energy tornadoes didn't stop. Although the flying fishes had calmed down, they didn't seem to have any intention of leaving. Instead, they continued to pass through the energy tornadoes, as if waiting for Lin Xiao to appear again. Lin Xiao quietly waited in the space for the situation outside to calm down. The others also found a place to stand, sit, or squat. After more than 10 minutes, Lin Xiao saw the flying fishes begin to fly down one by one, all diving into the water with a whooshing sound. Lin Xiao immediately became spirited. It seemed like these things couldn't wait any longer and gave up. But soon, Lin Xiao found out that she was wrong. This was because after all the flying fishes fell into the water, an incomparably huge fish suddenly emerged from the water. This fish was at least 50 meters long, and its body was more than 10 meters wide. The two long fins on both sides spread out like the wings of an airplane. It jumped up, and directly jumped up to a height of a few hundred meters. Then it retracted its fins and flipped a few times. After flipping a few times, when it was about to fall down, it once again spread its fins and flew around. Moreover, its flying posture was very light. It swam around in the air, as if it was in the water, while swinging its soft and huge fishtail. If it wasn't for its ugly appearance, perhaps this would be a beautiful scenery. But its body was too big, so when it jumped up and flipped a few times, it scattered the energy tornadoes around it. Lin Xiao looked at the new Gaga, big flying fish, and was speechless again. He wanted to ridicule its crown. In fact, the bodies of these fishes could be considered normal. Apart from the fact that they didn't have scales, they were black and shiny. Coupled with the huge tail and two wing-like fins, they weren't ugly at all. It was just that their head shape was too strange, making people unable to look at them directly. Even if you had a bunch of spikes on your head, or a bunch of scales and horns, it would still be better than this big mushroom head. After the big fish came out, the small fishes disappeared without a trace. But as soon as the big fish came out, it flew a few rounds and scattered the dense energy tornadoes. The whirlpools under the river also disappeared because of the disappearance of the tornadoes. Looking at the big fish flying around, Lin Xiao couldn't help but think, if this fish looked better, or more majestic, it might have a bit of the feeling of the ancient mythological Kuanpeng. However, this guy's appearance really made people unable to associate it with the ancient mythological beast. But Lin Xiao was a little surprised by the movement this big guy made after coming out. It felt like it came out to cause trouble for the tornadoes. It was actually a help to Lin Xiao, compared to a huge target and a group of densely packed targets. Lin Xiao would rather choose the former. Because there was only one of the former, the absence of the tornadoes really helped her a lot. Thinking of this, she immediately stood up and quickly disappeared in front of the others. The instant her body flashed out of the space, she suddenly waved her hand, and a black flame rolled under her feet, carrying her quickly to the other side of the river. Chapter 1347. Because of the big fish's appearance, its swimming in the sky also disturbed the river and the energy tornadoes above. Therefore, Lin Xiao took this opportunity to quickly fly to the other side of the river. Lin Xiao's appearance immediately attracted the big fish's attention. It suddenly turned around and stared at Lin Xiao with its pair of fish eyes. It opened its huge mouth full of teeth and roared, "Roar!" At the same time, its body flicked its tail and flew towards Lin Xiao. Of course, Lin Xiao's speed was not much slower than it. Without the obstruction of the magnetic field of the tornadoes, she flew out of the river in the blink of an eye. However, she didn't stop because the big fish was still chasing after her. Roar! The big fish flapped its two fins that acted as wings from time to time and flew closely behind Lin Xiao. It flew very fast, opened its huge mouth, and swallowed Lin Xiao in one bite. Lin Xiao made a sharp turn, and at the same time, she threw a huge black flame into its mouth. Huff! The big fish bit the black flame, but black smoke came out of its mouth. Not only did it bite the black flame, but it also bit a mouthful of disgusting black flame. The big fish exhaled angrily, and a cloud of black smoke was spat out by it. Then it turned around and continued to rush towards Lin Xiao. At this time, Lin Xiao did not want to play with it at all. It would take a lot of time to kill it. Moreover, after biting the flame that she threw out, it casually spat it out. Lin Xiao's flame had no effect on it at all. After coming to this underground space, Lin Xiao felt that her ability was a lot weaker. It was obviously very powerful on the ground, but it was not very useful here. However, even if she could not defeat it, she could still run away. She would be much more relaxed on land. Lin Xiao suddenly landed on the ground, and then his whole body disappeared. Her transparent body quickly flew over the strange plants on the ground and looked up at the flying fish in the sky. Sure enough, the big fish lost its target and turned left and right. It flew to the east and then to the west. Its eyes looked up, down, left, right, front, back and forth, searching for traces of Lin Xiao. After looking around a few more times and not seeing anything, he suddenly plunged down. Hu Piu. Its huge body pressed over the plants on the ground, and its two flat fins cut off the tails of many plants. A gust of wind blew past, blowing the plants on both sides away. Lin Xiao looked at the big fish that was flying around randomly before he turned around and continued forward. The further she went, the more solemn she became. Any random fish that came out of the river was a rank 8 big fish. In addition to the few auras he sensed earlier, how many rank 8 creatures were there in this underground space? The level 8 creatures weren't as easy to deal with as the level 8 creatures on the surface, even though they didn't have any abilities. However, their bodies were tough to an unimaginable degree. It would not be easy to kill them. Moreover, if they were to fight to the death with them, they might even release their innate abilities in the end. Just like how De Zhuang dealt with Wu Qingyue, it was likely that these creatures would not use this move until the very last moment. However, once it was released, it would be a very troublesome situation. Lin Xiao felt that these creatures were not to be trifled with, but she had to find a way to deal with the creatures on the surface. If they only ate zombies, it would be fine, but the problem was that they ate everything. Everything on the ground was their food. Even the soil was probably their food. After all, the soil on the surface was much softer and smoother than the underground. Since all attacks were ineffective against them, she could only look for the problem from their source. The level 8 mutated creature was not easy to deal with. Lin Xiao didn't know how to deal with the level 9 creature even if she found it. Therefore, he gradually felt some pressure in his heart. Just as Lin Xiao gradually left the river and moved further away from the big fish that was still flying around randomly, thousands of miles ahead of her, there was a huge pit in the ground. On one side of the pit, about 20 to 30 meters away from her, the soil vibrated slightly for a few times. Then, the ground in these two places suddenly turned up, revealing a pair of huge mirror-like eyes. The two huge eyes blinked, and in the middle of the two huge eyes, there was a sudden poof sound, and a pile of sand sprayed out from the ground. A strong aura suddenly spread in all directions. Then, the two huge eyes seemed to look up, and after a minute of silence, they suddenly closed again. The bottom of the pit once again became calm. And this huge pit had an area of several kilometers. It was like a dry lake, and the bottom of the lake was 1 to 200 meters deep. At this moment, Lin Xiao suddenly felt a palpitation in her heart. She suddenly stopped on the branch of a plant. She stood up straight, frowned, and closed her eyes to feel around. However, this feeling of palpitation only lasted for a moment, so when she stopped, it disappeared without a trace. But Lin Xiao firmly remembered this feeling. Every time this feeling appeared in her heart, it indicated that some kind of crisis had appeared. This was also a warning that the further she went, the more dangerous it would be. But even if she knew that it was dangerous, of course, she couldn't turn back. After standing there and sensing for a while, Lin Xiao continued to jump forward. Before Lin Xiao crossed the river, the big red cat was anxiously pacing back and forth. It raised its head to look in Lin Xiao's direction from afar, while its feet kept moving in circles, and its tail was already drooping down. Turn left, turn right, raise your head, take a look. Turn left again, turn right again, raise your head again, take another look. Its two big red eyes were also filled with anxiety. After turning a few rounds, it couldn't help but take a few steps in Lin Xiao's direction. But it quickly retreated. Aoku, Aokuku. After retreating, it raised its head, stretched its neck and raised its chin. It opened its mouth and let out a few strange long howls. It seemed to want to convey something to Lin Xiao. Apart from it, the other underground creatures also began to restrain their aura. Even the big fish that was flying around suddenly plunged into the river with a plop sound. Not to mention the underground creatures that could run and jump. Even the moving mutated plants shrunk into a ball and remained motionless. Lin Xiao, who was running forward, suddenly stopped. She turned her head to look behind her. Her eyes revealed a puzzled expression as she looked behind her in bewilderment. Why did she seem to have heard a few big red sounds just now? Was it an auditory hallucination? Chapter 1348. Lin Xiao turned around and knitted her brows in confusion. Logically speaking, she should be more than 10 kilometers away from Big Red. No matter how good her hearing was, it was impossible for her to hear Big Red's voice from so far away. Unless it chased after her. Lin Xiao turned around again and felt that something was wrong, because she could vaguely feel that Big Red's aura was still there. After thinking for a while, she turned around and continued forward. However, the further she went, the more frequent the chills on her back became. Every instinct in her body was telling her not to go any closer. She arrived at a suddenly flat and empty space. In front of her was a desolate and empty space without any plants. The ground was dark rock, and she couldn't see the end of it even after looking for a long time. Not only was this place empty, but even the energy layer above was much shorter and very thick. However, the strange thing was that there were no energy tornadoes landing on the ground. It was quiet all around, and even the energy layer above was much calmer. However, after arriving here, Lin Xiao smelled an unusual scent. This scent was very strong, indicating that this land was not to be invaded by other creatures. Intruders would be completely strangled. Not to mention that there were no other auras on this barren plain. There were no auras of other creatures in the surroundings. Lin Xiao stood on a tree at the obvious border and looked at the empty space in front of her. She knew that she had arrived at her destination. The aura in this land overlapped with the uneasy aura she felt before. This meant that the danger she felt along the way was coming from here. Moreover, it also meant that this level 9 creature was awake and not in a state of hibernation. Although the area in front of her was barren, the presence of this aura made this place a very mysterious and terrifying forbidden area. Lin Xiao heaved a sigh of relief before leaping forward and entering the area. She was currently invisible, so she could only run forward with her feet. It wasn't that she couldn't use her ability, but the aura of her ability would definitely attract the attention of that thing. Although she was running, Lin Xiao's speed was not slow. As a level 8 zombie emperor, her physical strength couldn't be ignored. When he ran, he was like a gust of wind that couldn't be seen by the naked eye. The sound of her footsteps on the ground was very, very soft, so even though the area was very quiet, the sound of her running footsteps could not be heard. When he stood at the border and looked at the open space, he estimated that it was at least 10 to 20 kilometers in radius. However, after Lin Xiao followed the aura and kept running forward, she felt that the open space here should be more than 10 or 20 miles wide. It was very big. Lin Xiao, who had been running for half an hour, felt that with her current speed, she should be able to run more than 300 kilometers per hour. After running for half an hour, he still couldn't see the end in front of him. It could be imagined how many kilometers he had already run. It was at least 100 kilometers away, and he didn't know how long it would take to reach the border. With such a large territory, it seemed that this rank 9 fellow was also a colossus. Following the strong smell, Lin Xiao got closer and closer to the sunken pit. There was nothing around her. If it wasn't for Lin Xiao's sharp sense of direction, she would have lost her direction. Just when Lin Xiao was thinking about how far the nest of that thing was, she suddenly saw a huge pit in the distance. When she was a few kilometers away from the pit, she suddenly smelled a smell that was 100 times stronger than before. That's right. It's here. Lin Xiao's heart settled, and she immediately slowed down her pace. She slowly walked forward until she reached the edge of the pit. Only then did she see the scene below. It was dry down there, and the terrain was uneven. The bottom was also about 100 to 200 meters deep. The strong smell coming from below made Lin Xiao cover her nose. Apart from the strong smell of this creature, there was also a rotten smell. She didn't know what kind of beast it was. The center of the pit was clean, but the edge was filled with all kinds of huge beast bones. The bones at the top were still fresh, but mixed with the smell of the corpses in the middle for a period of time. The smell in the pit could suffocate a large number of people to death. Lin Xiao looked at the beast's bones and found that the skulls were very large. Some of the skulls were more than 10 meters wide. The other ribs and vertebrae were very thick, with a diameter of 3 to 6 meters. It seemed that this creature's appetite was also very big, and from the residual energy on these beast bones, they were all mutated beasts that were not lower than rank 7. This creature's appetite was so big, but it still chased the underground creatures out. Why? Wasn't it afraid of starving to death? Or were the rank 7 and 8 underground creatures not its subordinates, but actually its food? Thinking of this, Lin Xiao looked back. She looked past the pit in front of her, and to the left and right sides. Then, she lowered her head to stare at the center of the pit and pondered. Along the way, she didn't count those that hid their auras. Not only did she sense the auras of rank 8 creatures, but there were also many rank 7 creatures. Moreover, it was easier for her to sense the rank 7 creatures. Why did it leave a large number of rank 7 and above creatures here, while those that were chased out were below rank 7, and a few were rank 7? Lin Xiao looked at the surrounding barren environment in confusion, then turned to look at the underground jungle behind her, that could no longer be seen. Since she couldn't figure it out alone, she might as well go into the space and think about it together with everyone. As soon as he thought of this, Lin Xiao immediately disappeared above the hole. After Lin Xiao came in, the others looked at her quietly. None of them made a sound. Lin Xiao glanced at them and found that Yuan Tianxing had also run over and was sitting on a single-seater sofa. I'm at the edge of the rank 9 creature's lair. It's hiding in a pit. It's probably pretending to be asleep, not in a deep sleep. As far as I could see, its territory was empty, with nothing around it. Apart from dark rock and soil, there are no plants, not even rocks. It's flat. However, there's a pit about 3 to 5 kilometers wide and 200 meters deep in the middle. It's hiding there. The bottom of the pit was filled with the leftover bones of the 9th level creature, piled up in a circle. I reckon that its appetite is astonishing. Also, I can sense the auras of many rank 7 and 8 underground beasts along the way. There are very few that are below rank 5 and 6, except for the fish in the river. Lin Xiao sat on the sofa and explained the situation outside to the people in the living room. So, why do you think it chased so many low-level beasts, which are its food, to the surface? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.